Hey guys! This is part 6 of What If Naruto Was Trained by Kurama. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 15. Everyone loves Naruto. Early one morning at a training field in Sunigakure. Kamatachi no Jutsu, cutting whirlwind! A young blonde woman shouted as she swung her massive battle fan. A huge gust of cutting whirlwind came into being and spun across the landscape in front of her, slicing up dead trees, leaving gashes and boulders, and sucking up the dry desert soil to form large dust clouds. The woman then closed her steel fan and planted it upright with a loud thud on the ground next to her. Panting heavily and sweating profusely under the hot desert sun, she tugged a small towel free from the black sash of her light blue battle kimono and used it to wipe the sweat and grime off her face before draping it over one of her shoulders. Sabaku no Temari let out a weary sigh as she watched her creation slowly die down to a small gust before disappearing. 14 uses of that jutsu in a row this time, one more than last week. That'll do for the day. The quad-pigtailed girl murmured softly to no one in particular as she strapped the closed giant fan to her back. She spent most of her time, since graduating from the academy last year, training and doing random missions, and she had grown up quite a bit in the last 3 years since she was in Konoha. She was about to reach her full height, and her body had already undergone most of puberty. Her wide hips, heart-shaped behind, and growing bust all wrapped up in her conservatively styled but tight battle kimono were testament to that fact. However, other usual signs of being a woman stopped at that, as she preferred to be somewhat abrasive, never liked talking girly topics like boys and clothing, and she hated wearing makeup, unlike one of her brothers. Because of that, she found it hard to make friends with girls her age. As for boys, she wasn't impressed with every male she met so far in this village and was only too happy to let the threat of being around her powerful father and brothers scare them off, since she didn't care to befriend cowardly males. The lone girl walked off the training ground toward the main part of Suna. She was walking slowly in order to recover from pushing herself past her limits just now. Even though she had 2 years to get used to having her giant steel fan with her all the time, she certainly didn't appreciate the extra weight when her tired legs screamed in protest against moving with so much extra weight. She didn't notice the villagers giving her a wide berth since she was used to being treated like this and simply stopped caring a long time ago. Even her fellow genin didn't want anything to do with her other than having to interact with her professionally. A small part of the reason for this treatment was because her father was the Kazekage, a cold and intimidating leader of this village, and the people didn't want to risk upsetting his daughter. The larger part of that reason was her youngest brother, Gaara. As Temari turned down a main street, lined with cautious onlookers, toward the Kazekage Tower, she thought about her youngest brother. Gaara was feared and vilified in this village as the jinchuriki of the Ichibi, Shikaku. Until recently, he used to have bouts of insanity, and killed anyone nearby as the bijou within continued to corrupt the young boy's mind. However, thanks to extensive training under their father, Gaara gained better control of Shikaku's power and, to Temari's horror, his bouts of insanity gave way to cold indifference to any life. A reason, even a meager one, was all he needed to rip apart anyone in his sight, as he began to believe his sole reason to exist was to kill. Temari wondered not for the first time if it was better for him to have remained insane. At least she would have been able to tell when he was about to lose it, then take measures to avoid him before the big meltdown. Now, she had no warning if he decided to kill her. If he decided she interfered with his reason to exist in any way, that was it for her. In the next instant, her blood and insides would be squeezed out of her like toothpaste in his Sabaku Soso, sand waterfall funeral. Temari suppressed her shudder at the image as she entered the Kazekage Tower and made her way to her father's office. She knocked on the door and waited. A muffled "Enter" was heard before she opened the door to see her father, the Kazekage, sitting behind a modest desk in a modest office. Raza was in his Kazekage outfit but did not wear the hat and veil. He only wore them outside the village or when he met with officials. If Temari needed any help imagining how Gaara would look when he grew up, the perfect example was sitting in front of her. They were near identical, with their short dark red hair, their black ringed eyes, at least whenever her father was controlling gold dust, and their lean physique. She silently stepped up in front of the desk and stood waiting for her father to shift his attention up from the paperwork sewn around the desk. Despite their cold and formal relationship, she had to fight to stifle a smirk when she heard his muttering. So what if I can control gold dust? It's not going to help here, and I'd give anything to learn a jutsu that would get rid of this blasted paperwork quickly. She silently waited a few more minutes before her father perked his head up from the papers. Thank you for your patience, Temari. I requested for you to come here to ask you a few questions. How did your training go? Raza asked as he leaned back into his chair, his tone betraying neither interest or indifference. I'm gaining more experience with my battle fan every day, and I'm learning to make better and efficient use of my chakra reserves, Temari reported, her tone just as neutral. She wondered where this was going. I also hear you're much more skilled compared to other genin. I apologize once again for holding you back from promotion until I feel Gaara is ready. Kankuro is also coming into his own as a shinobi after his recent graduation. It is my desire for all three of you to be a team and work together on getting promoted to the Chunin rank. I hope you understand that. Even though Temari had heard this many times before, it sent a cold chill down her spine every time she was reminded that she would have to work in close proximity to Gaara for any length of time. She straightened up with her gaze focused on a spot just above the sitting Kage. Yes, Kazekage-sama. I have a somewhat personal proposal for you. She shifted her eyes down to look into her father's expressionless eyes and inclined her head, indicating for him to continue. I will be leaving tomorrow for Kanahigakure for some diplomatic matters. Raza paused to let that settle in. He noticed Temari's stature became even more stiff at the mention of Konoha, and he thought she was fighting to suppress a gasp. You may come with me if you still have business you'd like to take care of in that village, he offered to his daughter. He knew she was still regretting what happened last time she was there, no matter how well she acted like she moved on from that incident. He might have been non-existent as a father, and he turned one of his children into a weapon for the sake of protecting the village, but he wished to at least make sure his two other children ended up with some measure of happiness. Even if it meant befriending a shinobi from another village. Kankuro was easy. Get him a mountain of puppet parts and an endless supply of women's makeup and he was set for life. Temari was more difficult since she closed herself off from everyone in Suna and, while she had a relatively comfortable life as royalty in this village, she wasn't happy. The first and only time he saw a truly genuine smile on her since the death of his wife was when she returned to the main gate from her tour of Kanahigakure with that blonde boy. Somehow, this Uzumaki Naruto was able to break his daughter out of her shell a little in a span of few hours. He decided it was worth offering her a chance to come back to Konoha and hopefully resolve any leftover guilt from that Kyubi incident once and for all, and move on. Raza watched Temari's teal eyes widen slightly at his offer. She remained stoic on the outside, but the inside was a different story. Her emotions were in a turmoil as she thought over this chance. If she took this offer to travel with her father, she would be able to seek out Uzumaki Naruto and apologize profusely to him until he forgave her. She'd have patched up what little friendship she could salvage with him and move on to better things between them. It was going to be that easy. Yet something held her back from accepting right away. It had been almost 3 years. Surely he had forgotten about her by now, even though she hadn't. Even if that wasn't the case, there were no reason for him to forgive her. Instead, he might have built up resentment against her for hurting his feelings so badly. Not to mention that Hyuga friend of his, and she had a feeling that girl and Naruto were much closer than what she saw that day. How would that girl react to her presence around Naruto? Temari was also ashamed to admit that she was still wary of the fact that he carried the Kyubi within him. To stem her guilt, she rationalized that she only saw Naruto for no more than 5 hours, and she couldn't have known what he was really like from that small sample size. She kept overlaying the image of her psychotic brother onto Naruto's and subconsciously told herself to be afraid around the blonde as well. Just as much she wanted to go back to Konoha if only to apologize, she was apprehensive of what awaited her there. Finally, after a long moment of silence, she made her decision and opened her mouth with the idea to accept the invitation. I'm sorry, Kazekage-sama. Thank you for your offer, but I respectfully decline. She was surprised at what came out of her mouth, but it was too late to take it back. She suddenly felt like a coward, like this village's men that she usually derided. The slight narrowing of her father's eyes at her reply added a lot to the mental blow. I see. I'll leave early in the morning, so don't expect to see me around for the next week. Please pass that on to your brothers if you're able. If that is all, you're dismissed, he replied coolly. Temari looked like she wanted to say otherwise for an instant, before she schooled her expression and turned around to leave. Her father's voice stopped her at the door. Temari, I might run into the Uzumaki boy. Is there any message you'd like for me to pass on to him? Temari stood at the door for a long moment. Upon hearing that name, a large part of her screamed at her to turn around and take the trip to Konoha anyway, or at least get a message to Naruto, but for some reason, she kept listening to the smaller and cowardly part of her that didn't want to deal with the emotional turmoil that would surely occur from this. She silently shook her head before slowly stepping out and closing the door behind her. If her father had been able to see her face at that moment, he'd see his daughter fighting to keep tears from falling out of her eyes as her face twisted into an expression of anguish and extreme self-loathing. Raza sighed and rubbed his eyelids. She's so much like her mother, even in their stubbornness. They'd rather wallow in regret as punishment than try to chase after a better outcome. I wonder if Kurura-chan would have fought harder against the two elders' suggestion to make Gaara the Ichibi host if she didn't feel she owed the village because of some mistakes she made in the past. Granted. I wasn't much better since I supported that decision. Spending a long moment looking out the office's window over the village, he came to a decision. He turned to the desk and pulled out a blank scroll to write down what he needed to do for a plan he came up with in his head. I may have been a shitty father, but if there's only one thing I could do for her, it'll be this. It'll likely take a while to come to fruition, but I think she will eventually find this a blessing. I just hope she won't spend too long cursing me first before she'd accept this. Around the same time in Konohagaku's Hyuga compound, the same morning sun shone warmly into a large and open breakfast nook of the Hyuga clan head's luxurious and tastefully decorated home. Inside the nook was a small and cozy rectangular dining table, used only for breakfasts, most lunches, and snacks. The Hyuga clan head, Hayashi, sat at one end with his back to the sunlight as he silently read over the local news and some daily reports about the large clan he controlled. Hinata and Hanabi sat to the left of him, and Naruto sat to his right with Tomo sitting on the blonde's other side. Tomo was a branch member personally selected by Hayashi to be the primary caretaker for Hinata and Hanabi after Hitomi's death. Although she was the one that prepared the meals and took care of the house like a servant, the girls adored her and Hayashi greatly respected her, so she was seen as a part of the family in many ways, including eating meals with them as an equal. They were enjoying eating their breakfast of miso soup, mackerel, and steamed rice with tea. It was a happy and regular morning for all except Naruto, who seemed to be receiving a somewhat frigid reception from Hayashi. Beautiful and mischievous Tomo was only too happy to point it out for her own amusement. Era, it seems you have done something to earn my lord's ire once again, Naruto-sama. She pointed out innocently, not even bothering to hide her Cheshire grin very well behind her left hand at Naruto's obvious discomfort, while he continued to eat in silence with a twitching eyebrow. Hinata and Hanabi were doing their best to eat while fighting back their own amusement as their father continued to read over his clan's reports in silence. Naruto finally finished his breakfast and formally set his chopsticks down across the empty plate and wiped his mouth slowly with a napkin, his eyebrows still twitching much to the present female's amusement. It was funnier watching their favorite blonde try to ignore everything rather than react for some reason. After carefully folding the napkin and setting it down, Naruto let out a loud sigh, catching everyone's attention. Yes, it seems like I have earned Lord Hyuga's ire, and it breaks my heart, Tomo-san. However, I am unable to ascertain as to what it is I have done wrong. Therefore, I must make a deduction. I believe I can solve this in 3 questions. He spoke clearly and formally with his eyes closed and facing straight ahead, making Hinata and Hanabi almost unable to contain their snickering. Tomo had no such reservation. The only reaction out of the stone-still Hayashi was a slight flicker of the paper in his hands. First, I would be honored if you would allow me to inquire something of you, my fair lady. Naruto began smoothly as he opened his eyes and turned to face Tomo fully. The servant blushed prettily and giggled at the compliment before nodding. The girls were holding in their sides trying not to laugh. I have noticed a pattern in the occasions I supposedly earned Lord Hyuga's ire since all of this began. Please enlighten me on what week of this month is, Tomo-san. It was apparent to everyone that Hayashi caught on to what Naruto was getting at since the paper in his hands flinched more visibly this time and his eyebrows furrowed slightly. I believe this is the 4th week of the month. Tomo answered airily. She knew what was getting under Hayashi's skin, but it was fun seeing her lord squirm a little. Naruto shifted his focus to the snickering Hanabi, who stopped suddenly under his gaze and tried her best to look prim and proper, even when her lips were twitching, trying not to smile. My ever-adorable Lady Hanabi, what does Lord Hyuga do on the weekend before the 4th week of each month? My good sir, on that weekend every month, Father looks over the entire clan's monthly expenses report and checks for any discrepancy. Hanabi replied crisply and haughtily, hamming this up for all it was worth, though her cheeks were pink at being called adorable. Naruto's lips twitched upward for an instant before he shifted his gaze to Hinata, who now stopped raising her cinnamon bun midway to her opening mouth. My cute Lady Hinata, this is my final question. What would the all-seeing Lord Hyuga find on such a report that might make him slightly less than warm toward me for a few days each month? I believe this began 6 months ago at approximately the same time as when I accidentally introduced you to the pastry you are now holding in your hands. Naruto pointed at the offending pastry dramatically, making Hinata drop it to the plate with a clatter in shock. She shrank into herself as her gaze refused to meet anyone's for the moment. She was also secretly ecstatic at being called cute. I know. It might be the total expense of pastries bought by this clan each month, she murmured shyly, making Hanabi and Tomo snicker while Naruto smirked. Both Hayashi's eyebrows were now twitching continuously, and the paper in his hands was shaking a little. Therefore, it is my firm belief the reason Lord Hyuga has had a slightly chilly deposition toward me for a few days at this time each month was because he saw that specific expense, which is probably shockingly high. He was then reminded of the fact that I was the one who introduced Lady Hinata to cinnamon buns. Naruto concluded with finality, as if he just solved a great mystery. Hinata was now blushing and squirming as she looked down at her hands folded in her laps. Hanabi and Tomo were giggling uncontrollably. Finally, Hayashi abruptly put the paper down on the table with a loud crinkle, ceasing all noise around the table as they all watched Hayashi's eyebrows furrow further into a frown in a rare display of emotion for him. My eldest daughter's eating habit alone cost more than the entire clan's monthly supply of hair products. How is that possible? He finally said with disbelief clear in his voice. Everyone sat in stunned silence for a long moment until Naruto broke it with a snort of laughter. Tomo and Hanabi followed that with their loud giggles. Father! Naruto-kun! You're mean! Hinata whined adorably with a pout. After a moment of laughing and teasing between the children, Tomo clapped her hands sharply, catching everyone's attention. Now that the morning entertainment is over, it's almost time for Lady Hinata and Naruto-sama to leave for the academy. Lady Hanabi is to begin her tutoring as well, Tomo announced. The women stood to take their plates to the kitchen. Naruto was about to get up and do the same when Hayashi's voice stopped him. Naruto-san, please remain here for a moment. Naruto complied and allowed Tomo to take his plate, and the women moved into the kitchen area chatting excitedly about the day ahead. My apologies, Naruto-san. I was never truly upset with you about my daughter's eating habits. She was bound to come across that treat sooner or later even without your part in it. Hayashi formally spoke when the two males were alone. Naruto shook his head and waved it off. I knew that, Hayashi-sama. You're usually hard to catch off guard, so it was fun getting to do that though, he replied with a foxy smirk. Hayashi nodded and smiled a little. I know what you are doing for my daughters and I appreciate it. What am I doing? He tried to be clueless but quailed under Hayashi's deadpan expression. Do you honestly expect me to believe that act? All right, the blonde admitted with a sigh. It's only natural. I'm trying to keep the girls happy and laughing as much as I can before it's time. I do not have to check a calendar to know when it is about time for you to leave for your yearly training trip, Hayashi commented as he watched his daughters and Tomo chatting happily while they washed their dishes on the other side of the large kitchen/nook area. Naruto's blue eyes softened. Yeah, every year they always started dragging me over here for almost every single meal for a whole week leading up to the day I leave, since they want to spend every possible minute with me, he replied with a wan smile. Like the past 3 summers, they will miss you terribly this time too, Naruto-san. Hayashi spoke softly, and Naruto nodded sadly. He finally let out a sigh after a moment's silence and slowly stood up. He then leaned down next to Hayashi. I think I know the particular food you should avoid giving Hanabi-chan in case she might have Hinata-chan's level of addiction to it, he whispered, but he was surprised by a hand suddenly shooting up to grab his collar and pulling him in a mere inch from Hayashi's frightfully desperate face. That knowledge must never get out, understand? We cannot risk both my daughters having such addictions. This clan will truly go under, he whispered harshly. That's why I'm whispering this to you. Naruto was trying not to show discomfort under the older man's expression of pure paranoia. I can read lips. Mouth it to me silently. Hayashi whispered almost frantically as he repeatedly glanced in the direction of Hanabi, making sure she didn't see this interaction. Naruto rolled his eyes at the clan head's extreme caution, before shrugging and mouthed, "Banana pudding." "Of course." Hayashi breathed out dramatically as he gently let go of Naruto's collar and seemed to stare out blankly into the distance, linking together clues in his mind. He knew his youngest daughter liked banana and many snacks that had its flavor. She had yet to try some banana pudding, which was considered one of the most delectable banana-flavored treat around, and he would be damned if he let her eat one now. As Hayashi was silently going over his plan to tell the clan's chefs, Tomo, and Hanabi's private tutors to not even mention this as of now forbidden snack, Naruto shrugged bemusedly and walked off to leave the clan head in his own world. Later in the afternoon at the academy, what's going on here? Haruno Sakura was screaming in her mind as she watched her friend, Yamanaka Ino, easily and mercilessly knock another female student out of the sparring ring with impressive strength and speed. She was happy to see Ino improving a lot, but she was also jealous that the gap between them was still growing wider, despite her increased training as of late. "Winner by ring out, Yamanaka Ino! Please take your seat with the others. Inazuka Kiba and Aburame Shino, come forward." Iruka called out as Ino giddily skipped over to Naruto and Hinata at the edge of the sparring ring on the opposite side from the pinkette. The two selected combatants stood up and made their way to the center of the ring. Sakura noticed her friend/rival was so happy about something that she practically tackled and hugged both Naruto and Hinata. It clearly wasn't just about the victory just now, something else was involved as well. She noted that Naruto seemed to have reminded Ino about something, and she stuck her tongue out cutely in embarrassment. The young pink-haired woman frowned in confusion as she watched Ino put up a hand seal she never saw before and whispered something. Nothing changed except that the blonde's arms seemed laden with some extra weight when they just dropped to her sides lazily. Ino obviously was complaining a little with her cheeks cutely puffed out, while Naruto shook his head in exasperation and Hinata giggled with a hand covering her lips. Before Sakura could dwell on this some more, she was distracted by the oohing and eyeing of the large crowd of students standing around the 25-meter sparring circle. She shifted her attention to the center and watched Kiba and Shino display some impressive taijutsu. That wasn't new since they usually gave Sasuke issues in their past spars. However, what was new to her was the polished and efficient way they moved around the ring, and their strikes seemed sharper and cleaner now too. It was like they spent some time practicing against superior opponents that forced them to push themselves hard and gain experience. After a few minutes of impressive sparring, it was decided Kiba was the winner when he barely managed to force Shino out of the ring when he went all out with his clan style's four-leg stance. Sakura wondered what the hell was going on as she watched Naruto call out to the boys to remember to turn them back on, and they nodded back in his direction as they walked off the ring to make way for the next two combatants. Across the ring, Ino was watching Sakura's confused expression with half amusement and half guilt. "I really hate leaving Forehead-chan in the dust like that, but as long as she doesn't want to join this group and practice with us, she might never catch up," she commented sadly as she watched Sakura analyze the previous bout, and she knew her pink-haired friend was trying to figure out why past and current data didn't compute. Naruto frowned. "She specifically said she doesn't want to join the group? I'm sure we would have said yes if she asked nicely," he replied. Ino shook her head. "No, she hadn't said anything about me hanging out with you guys, but it's clear she wouldn't want to, and that's because of certain blondes in the group." "Oh, she doesn't like you anymore? I can see why," Naruto retorted with a straight face. An indignant Ino swatted his arm sharply and Hinata giggled from his other side. "So it's just because I don't let her bully me like how she tried to make fun of me to help herself look good for my Sasuke-clan." Naruto acted out the last part in a high-pitched voice like a lovesick fangirl. This made both girls shudder. "Please do not talk like that again," Hinata almost ordered. "Yeah, what she said?" Ino added. Naruto grimaced and felt a little dirty, so he agreed wholeheartedly. "Anyway, I believe Sakura-chan said something to that effect." Ino got back on track. He shrugged. "In my opinion, I did her a favor. Putting others down to look good for someone just makes you look stupid to every single person in the vicinity, including the one you're trying to look good for. That was long ago, and she has been changing a lot lately. She's just being stubborn, holding on to some belief she would lose any chance with Sasuke-san if he knew she was training with another man, especially his self-appointed nemesis." Ino supplied. Naruto glanced around the crowd of students in confusion. "He has a nemesis?" he asked in genuine surprise, making Hinata giggle and Ino almost face fault. I'm talking about you, she growled in exasperation. Me? Oh, I've never bothered to think of him as a rival. I would say my closest rival right now would be Anko-chan. She's so much stronger than me and I have a long way to catch up, but I always did my best in my spars with her. I agree with that assessment. She does make you strive to improve yourself, Naruto-kun. Hinata interjected, remembering the few times she watched them spar. Anko was brutal and efficient in destroying Naruto systematically, but she saw he was truly having fun and learning. Naruto looked over at his indigo-haired friend with some scrutiny. Ever since that night when he honestly answered her question about Anko, she seemed to have changed some of her attitude toward the young jounin. There was none of the slight wariness he felt from her whenever Anko's name was mentioned, and she seemed to be totally secure with the fact that purple-haired woman was friends with him now. It was odd answering that question, and then she just had this satisfied smile on her face while we finished walking the rest of the way back that night. I can't help you with that. Not even I, a female, could fully understand a different female's thought process in some regards. Kurama added in from the mindscape. I'd be shocked if you did understand. You're like the biggest tomboy I've ever met, literally and figuratively. You're more one of the guys than a girly girl. You think you can say that and get off easy, you puny little shit? Get your ass in here so I can shove a bijadama up it. The fox growled. Your Honor, I present Exhibit A. Naruto chuckled inwardly as he tuned out more of the fox's rant. He was going to get it later tonight, but it was worth it riling his old friend up once in a while. He was brought out of his banter by Iruka's loud and somewhat uncertain voice. Uchiha Sasuke and Uzumaki Naruto. A cheer went up around the assembled students as Naruto jerked his head up in surprise. He hadn't been called on to spar with Sasuke in a long while, and it didn't look like Iruka planned this. After a quick good luck from the two girls, he hopped over to his sensei. Something bothering you, Iruka-sensei? He whispered to the confused man. Yes. This isn't what I planned in advance. I was going to pair you against Shikamaru, but someone switched this around, he explained as he looked suspiciously at his clipboard like it betrayed him. Naruto's gaze was on Sasuke throughout Iruka's statement, and he narrowed his eyes when he noticed the Uchiha nod imperceptibly with a smirk in the direction of an equally smirking Mizuki. Well, I'll be sure to tell Shika that. He'll be thanking whoever did this profusely. Naruto joked before he added with a bored tone. Looks like someone wants me to learn my place or something by going up against an elite and losing like usual. And will you be losing like usual? Yuka's voice was laced with his disapproval of this deception. Naruto only responded with a smirk. Just call the match like you see it, Iruka-sensei, he suggested before moving to the center of the ring to face against Sasuke while Iruka followed to stand between the two boys. It was clear he didn't like this development from the frown on his face, but to call foul on this would just cause unnecessary confusion. Sasuke and Naruto just stared at each other, one with a cocky smirk and the other with a bored expression. What were you talking about with Iruka-sensei? Asking to forfeit already? Sasuke spoke loud enough for everyone to hear, hoping to rile Naruto up enough to fight him more seriously. However, he wasn't expecting to see Naruto's eyebrows shoot up in genuine realization. Oh, Iruka-sensei, can I forfeit? This is too troublesome, he drawled out in a perfect impersonation of Shikamaru. This elicited uproarious laughter from some, boos from others, and an annoyed rant from a certain platinum blonde about Shikamaru's laziness spreading. That's my thing you're stealing, the genuine article called out lazily from somewhere in the audience, starting another round of laughter. Meanwhile, this only made Sasuke get more annoyed to say the least. Just fight me for real, you coward! He growled out at Naruto's bored expression. Why bother? We both know the outcome. I'm going to lose like usual, and you get your usual praises and further inflating of your already giant ego. Forget this. I'm stepping out, Iruka-sensei. Find another cannon fodder for this guy, Naruto announced as he turned around and began moving toward the edge of the sparring circle. Sasuke had enough of this blonde's infuriating attitude. How dare this nobody belittle his efforts to improve himself and gain power to kill that man? Coward! We know why you can't stand up against me. It's because you have no pride in yourself and your name when your whore of a mother popped you out and abandoned you in some dirty alley, you no-name orphan, he screamed to the blonde's back. He knew he screwed up as soon as he said that when everything went silent. Naruto stopped dead in his track and the temperature inside the ring seemed to have dropped several degrees. The silence was broken by most of the students shouting angrily at Sasuke to apologize for that remark, since some of their relatives and friends were orphans too. Even some of his supporters seemed to act like he was a despicable being now. Hinata was having to hold back a frothing Ino while a loudly buzzing Shino was doing the same with Kiba. The cold glares from Shikamaru and even the usually gentle Choji was enough to unnerve Sasuke as well. He tried to ignore it, but even the expression of disbelief on the usually loyal Sakura was enough to strike a small mental blow against him. He turned his attention back to Naruto, who was standing deathly still facing away. The raven-haired boy glanced up at Iruka only to flinch at the clear expression of disappointment in his face. For one fleeting moment, he almost wished Iruka would quickly accept the forfeit, because he knew he wasn't going to like anything Naruto would throw at him now. Especially when he saw the portion of the crowd Naruto was facing were moving away from his gaze in terror of whatever expression he was displaying at the moment. It all fell silent again as everyone waited for Naruto to say or do something. Time seemed to have stopped for a long moment as everyone focused so hard on the stone-still blonde for even the slightest movement, that almost all flinched when he exhaled loudly as if he seemed to expel something out of his body. He turned around on his heels and Sasuke was confused to see what looked like a neutral expression with a pair of icy blue eyes. However, it didn't seem to be the case for those who knew him well when Ino gasped. "He's seriously pissed. Naruto! He's not worth it!" she shouted out in a pleading tone. The way she said it, like Sasuke was going to lose, put some fire back under him, and he growled at the insinuation. He was finally getting what he wanted in getting Naruto serious enough, and that girl was trying to ruin it. "Shut up, you annoying bitch! I want him like this!" he shouted harshly over his shoulder at Ino, who flinched visibly with a hurt expression. Another drop in temperature showed Sasuke it was one more wrong thing to say in front of Naruto. Getting nervous, he turned back and managed to not flinch at Naruto's icy blue eyes getting even colder, and his somewhat neutral expression turning into a menacing scowl. "That idiot's fucked. Not only his mom, but he just had to talk bad about one of his friends." Kiba groaned out loud at Sasuke's stupidity. Ino and Hinata held each other and prayed that Naruto wouldn't get in trouble from this. "Iruka-sensei. It seems, in my rush to get off the ring, I didn't properly hear the exact rules for this spar," Naruto neutrally asked the still disappointed Iruka, who turned his attention away from the raven-haired idiot. He then sighed as he observed his favorite blonde's stature. Naruto was ready to rip something apart, and a perfect target presented itself in the form of the Uchiha boy. The scarred man knew he should stop this before it even began, but he had a feeling they would have moved to an unsupervised location and things would get worse there. Therefore, he would allow this and do his best to keep Sasuke in one piece. "Okay boys, I want a clean fight. This is a taijutsu spar. No ninjutsu or weapon allowed. This spar will end with a knockout, forfeit, my judgment, or if one of you is pushed out of the sparring ring." "Understood, Iruka-sensei. So as long as he's conscious and remains inside the ring, I can keep going." "That's good to know," Naruto replied ominously with a feral grin that made a bead of sweat go down Sasuke's neck. Iruka sighed in disappointment at the Uchiha's conduct this day before raising his hand high into the air. "Begin!" he shouted before jumping back. Surprisingly, Naruto didn't immediately go into full attack mode. He just began walking silently and calmly towards Sasuke, his icy glare still locked on the doomed Uchiha. It was actually more unnerving this way to most people watching this spar unfolding. "Did you see Naruto adjust his seal just before he turned back to Sasuke-san?" Shikamaru cut in as he and Choji stepped in between the unaware Ino and Hinata, making them jump slightly, and Ino swatted his head lightly. "Shika! Don't scare us like that. Did you say he adjusted his seal?" Hinata asked nervously. "Oh damn, he turned it off. That moron is in even worse trouble." Kiba's voice cut in as he and Shino joined the rest. "No, he didn't. I read his lips. He said 3, not Kai or even 1. Choji reported for all. He also wasn't holding any bag of chips, showing how serious he was about this situation. So the reason he's walking calmly despite his expression looking like he would rip that idiot apart at any moment is because he slowed himself down that much? Ino was the one to say what everyone was thinking. "It looks like it. Naruto-kun is still giving Sasuke-san a shot despite his displeasure with what was said," Hinata remarked as she watched Naruto with hope that this wouldn't go too far after all. Just to be safe, she activated her Byakugan to make sure there was nothing funny from Sasuke. "Troublesome. As long as he's smart enough to take advantage of that handicap like a shinobi should, and not rush straight in, he'd win easily," Shikamaru commented. As if to prove him otherwise, Sasuke had enough of being glared at by Naruto, and snapped when he dashed in at full speed, with his right fist drawn back in a frontal assault. "And what if he did just that?" Shino cut in crisply as Shikamaru let out a long sigh. "Then, to copy Kiba from earlier, the idiot's fucked." Sasuke was speeding toward the slowly moving Naruto with his fist drawn back. He knew he was telegraphing this punch, but it was a feint anyway. As he neared the blonde, he withdrew his right fist and quickly transitioned into a left roundhouse kick without missing a beat. Naruto didn't look surprised at all as he calmly watched all of this happen while moving his right forearm up to block it easily. Before Sasuke could do more, a powerful impact spearing into his stomach nearly made him retch as he was blown back by the blonde's countering left fist. Sasuke's feet skidded to a stop a few meters back as he glared sharply up at the blonde, who slowly moved his arms back to a basic ready stance. His eyes were still icy, but his scowl from before had now changed into a cruel smirk, further infuriating the Uchiha. He growled sharply just before disappearing into a blur of speed, at least to most of the gathered crowd's eyes. A few pairs of eyes, one of them belonging to Naruto, easily followed his movements. Sasuke appeared behind his opponent on the left with a fist raised and aimed for the head, hoping to get a hit in. Naruto swayed his head to give the fist a slip, and rewarded this with a punishing elbow to the Uchiha's sternum. Sasuke gasped slightly in pain, before disappearing in a blur again. Once again, Naruto and a few others easily followed the movement. Sasuke reappeared again, this time spinning in a tight ball in the air just above the blonde. His right leg then whipped out in a powerful axe kick aimed for his opponent's left shoulder. This time, Naruto didn't do anything in response, mostly because his resistance seal wouldn't let him react quickly enough, so he prepared to receive the blow instead. The ground underneath the blonde cracked slightly as he squatted his body a little to absorb the powerful kick. Other than that, that was the only indication that Naruto actually felt anything aside from a small cut on his temple from the foot grazing against it. Sasuke landed on his left foot with his right still resting on Naruto's shoulder. He was so surprised by how easily the blonde absorbed his kick that he just left his foot up while Naruto straightened and reached up with his left hand to firmly grip the ankle with vice-like pressure. Sasuke, in shock at the sudden grip, tried to jump back but was held in place as if he was rooted to the spot. Naruto, still holding on to the foot, pulled Sasuke in, making him hop forward once on his free foot until the blonde was right in his face. Sasuke was too busy using his arms to balance himself to retaliate. Naruto chuckled lowly in a menacing way that sent absolute dread down Sasuke's spine. "You stupid ass. I handicapped myself to avoid accidentally hurting you badly, or even kill you. If you had just calmly analyzed my movement and took advantage like a shinobi should, you'd have won easily. I had a feeling you wouldn't, though. Now, this is for insulting my mother." Naruto spat out the last sentence venomously as he drew his left arm back. Even with level 3 from his resistance seal, he managed to unleash a powerful uppercut that sank deep into Sasuke's stomach with a loud thud heard throughout the sparring ring. The Uchiha's body folded like a piece of paper as it rose high into the air on Naruto's rising fist. The blonde then lowered his arm, putting a groaning and gasping Sasuke back on his now shaky foot. He let out a pained retch as he wobbled around, almost unable to keep standing while he still had his other foot gripped in Naruto's right hand. "Let go of my foot," Sasuke gasped out through the pain. "Sure," Naruto chirped with fake cheeriness, and he complied by tugging the Uchiha in toward him, getting him off balance, before suddenly releasing so he would stumble straight into a waiting right fist that connected with his cheek. The audience oohed at how Sasuke's face contorted grotesquely around Naruto's fist, and the loud crack that resulted. The raven-haired boy was sent flying to the other side of the ring. And that was for calling Ino-chan a bitch. Naruto roared. In the crowd, Ino covered her face with her hands as if to hide her embarrassment, but she was hiding a brilliant smile instead. A grinning Hinata wasn't fooled as she gently elbowed Ino in her ribs, making her squeal and jump slightly. Naruto, now adopting an indifferent expression with his hands in his pockets, began walking slowly toward the dazed Sasuke, who was still struggling to even get on all fours. He shook off his daze and his vision cleared enough to notice he was only a foot away from the sparring ring's boundary. A traitorous thought occurred to him. He would lose by deliberately stepping out, but it'd get him away from those painful strikes. The person who doled out the punishment seemed to have read his mind. "Go on," I don't care about this anymore, but I will continue if you decide otherwise. Naruto's calm voice cut into Sasuke's thoughts as he stopped and stood above the struggling Uchiha. Any thought of stepping out left the raven-haired boy immediately, and his hands clenched at the dirt with this humiliation. Using everything he had, he shot up to his feet quickly, hoping to surprise Naruto as he lashed out with a right hook at the blonde's face. The blonde just swayed his head enough to let the right slip by harmlessly, and Sasuke overextended until his face was inches from his opponent's now. Your choice. Naruto intoned lazily before Sasuke's world exploded in nothing but agony as he got a crushing headbutt to his now broken nose. He cried out as he clutched at his bloodied face and stumbled backward a little, his feet just inches from the ring's boundary. Meanwhile, Naruto slowly drew his right leg up with the knee touching his chest, as if to cock it, and shot it outward with full force. His foot smashed into Sasuke's chest hard and loud, likely fracturing a few ribs in the process. Everyone watched the elite Uchiha fly out of the ring like a low-flying missile for a good 10 meters before he landed harshly and tumbled to a stop. Throughout this entire exchange, Naruto never bothered taking either of his hands out of their pockets. After slowly lowering his fully extended leg to the ground, he glanced over his shoulder at a stunned Irika as if to remind him of something. The scarred sensei shook out of his daze and sighed in relief that the blonde didn't do too much to the Uchiha boy. Winner by ring out, Uzumaki Naruto. That was enough to send all the crowd into an uproar. Most of them cheered Naruto for teaching the Uchiha a lesson. After Sasuke's awful words earlier, not many of his remaining supporters wanted to speak out in his defense at the moment. Sakura was strangely silent as she seemed to be contemplating something, not even giving the laid-out Uchiha a glance. Naruto nodded his thanks to the crowd as he began walking back to Hinata and the others. You! I won't stand for this humiliation! I have to get stronger to kill that man, and you will not stand in my way! An insane voice roared out from behind him. Naruto turned his head around nonchalantly to see Sasuke struggling to his feet. Naruto-kun! He's gathering chakra in his lungs! It looks to be fire-natured! Hinata's voice called out warningly. The blonde widened his eyes in alarm. If Sasuke aimed a jutsu in his direction and he dodged it, it would hit those behind him, including his friends. He quickly turned around and already began running back toward the Uchiha. Sasuke, with an insane expression on his face now, was bringing his hands up to slowly form seals and his cheeks began to balloon, a clear sign of a katan jutsu. Naruto was still running towards Sasuke, momentarily encumbered by his resistance seal before he brought his hands up into the special seal. We'll need to get in close to stop whatever he was trying, so be careful. Please try not to kill him as well. We don't need the hassle from the fallout that would follow. Kurama advised from inside, genuine concern in her tone. He's trying to use a lethal jutsu on me. You're asking a lot of me to not kill him right now, but fine. No guarantee I won't permanently cripple him though. Naruto thought as he quickly released his seal with a shout of Kai, and his body instantly felt featherlight. He didn't take the time to enjoy the sensation as he dashed forward in a burst of speed that only the Chunin, Irika, and Nezuki followed. Sasuke was putting together a horse seal, the second to last in the seal sequence for his Gokaku Jutsu when he was shocked by Naruto suddenly appearing in his face. That shock turned to agony when the blonde quickly reached out with his left hand and trapped Sasuke's interlocked fingers with a grip hard enough that crackling bones were heard. Naruto's right hand then shot out to grab Sasuke's jaw in a vice-like grip and harshly forced his head up to face skyward. At that point, the pain of his fingers being crushed together was enough to make Sasuke scream, expelling all of the fire chakra he built up inside prematurely. He released it in an harmless explosion of flame up into the air. At least harmless to the bystanders, as Sasuke didn't get away from the premature release scot-free with his slightly charred tongue and lips. He sank to his knees, his head still locked skyward due to his jaw still being gripped by Naruto, and his entire body was in total agony now. He feebly shifted his gaze from the blue sky down into Naruto's ice-blue eyes, and the blonde looked murderous. First, you insult my mother and my friends. I was willing to let that slide when I got a few good licks in against you. However, this is too much. If you had gotten that fire jutsu off and I dodged it, it would have hit people behind me instead. You willingly put them in danger for your wounded pride. He growled out menacingly as he drew his left arm back, his hand shaped like a spearhead. Meanwhile, the stunned crowd around the two felt some pressure build in the air, and it made them uncomfortable. Irika widened his eyes, before he glanced over at Mizuki and was relieved his assistant didn't seem to have noticed it yet. Though, if the pressure got any higher and denser, it would feel familiar to anyone who lived through the QB attack all those years ago. He hoped Naruto kept calm enough to not let his control slip further, or he would get into trouble. The boy couldn't afford rumors spreading that he was letting the QB take over or something ridiculous like that. Right now, all the two instructors could do was dash toward the two boys as fast as they could, but they weren't going to reach them in time. "I'm going to make sure you don't ever get to be a shinobi right now," Naruto declared coldly as his grip on Sasuke's jaw tightened and his raised left hand seemed to grow sharpened fingernails. Feeling the full brunt of the pressure pressing down on him, and seeing the deadly-looking spear hand Naruto was aiming at him, Sasuke squeezed his eyes shut as he awaited his execution. A loud whoosh of a large body slipping through the air followed by a heavy thud of feet landing nearby gave him slight hope. The pressure lifting instantly and loud exclamations from the crowd around him raised his spirit enough to open one eye slightly. He was surprised to see a tall and broad-shouldered white-haired man, wearing an outfit that looked like a mixture of shinobi and kabuki styles, standing nonchalantly next to Naruto with his large right hand wrapped firmly around Naruto's trembling left forearm, stopped inches from its intended target. Naruto didn't give the man any notice as he stared coldly at Sasuke, refusing to release his jaw. Let the punk go. He doesn't know what he's doing," the white-haired man gently ordered of the blonde, though he made his displeasure with Sasuke known by aiming his sharp glare at him. He had heard the boy's words earlier after all. "He's not going to learn and he'll do something like this again. He also called Mom a whore." Naruto shot back coldly, his icy blue eyes still boring into Sasuke's onyx orbs. The battered Uchiha got the feeling they were arguing over if it was okay to put down a rowdy dog or not rather than discussing taking a human life, and that made him feel even more humiliated. "If you go any further than this after the official end of this spar, it would be assault by law. You're still a civilian and you can be tried by the civilian court with no interference from Sarutobi-sensei. This little shit's not worth going to jail for anything. You wouldn't want your friends to be unhappy without you around, would you?" the older man said, his tone going from gentle to cold. That hit Naruto right where it hurt when he finally turned his head to the tall man with a scowl. "That's a low blow, Jiraiya-sama." The polite title seemed to hit the Toad Sage where it hurt too, and he let out a sigh. "I know. Now drop the damn kid and let him get treatment." Naruto finally complied and let Sasuke go, who was now completely gobsmacked that the man standing there was one of the legendary Sannin and he was carrying on a conversation with the blonde as if they were old buddies. At that moment, the tall man let go of Naruto's forearm and turned to the stunned crowd. "One of you instructors who were totally useless during that entire incident should at least do something about the Uchiha boy," Jiraiya barked out sharply. It finally jolted Mizuki into action as he gently collected the shell-shocked Sasuke and led him into the academy building toward the medic's office. With Sasuke out of sight, Iruka stepped up to the pair and bowed formally to Jiraiya. "We're so sorry that someone as esteemed as you had to step in to stop a schoolyard brawl. Forgive our uselessness. It all happened so fast we barely reacted, Jiraiya-sama. Nothing to be done about that now, and it didn't go any further. I'm glad I decided to stop by here to see how the new generation was doing, and maybe inspire at least one aspiring young man to adopt my way." The Toad Sage replied with a laugh. Naruto being his student wasn't public knowledge yet, and he wanted to keep it that way if he could help it, at least until the blonde graduated. Despite that, he came here to check on him since it had been a while since the last time they saw each other. "You mean the way of the pervert?" Naruto retorted with a grin, already forgetting about what just happened with Sasuke. He was happy to see his godfather again after so long, after all. "Naruto! You should treat Jiraiya-sama with respect. He's one of the legendary Sannin." Iruka leaned in and whispered fervently to his student. Naruto just held his hand up to stop his sensei from talking more. "Wait for it," he said mysteriously just as Jiraiya laughed boisterously, and brought his hands up in front of him. Iruka suddenly had a bad feeling. "No. The way of the super pervert," he declared loudly for all assembled, his fingers wiggling perversely. This made all females in the area involuntarily take a step back and the males look at him in either awe or deadpan. Naruto was amused to note Kiba was one of the few awed by Jiraiya's display. Iruka's sweat dropped. "How did you know Jiraiya-sama was going to do that? Send everyone but my friends away and I'll explain. It's time I revealed something to you guys." Naruto spoke as his eyes seemed to show he had decided on something at that moment. I need to have a quick chat with Ero-sennin beforehand though, he called out as he walked over to the still laughing Jiraiya, leaving behind a confused sensei to do what Naruto asked. Oi, Ero-sennin! The blonde called out loudly, making Jiraiya face fault to the crowd's laughter. Oh, my ass! You should treat your elders with respect, you brat! The older man shot back after quickly getting back up. We need to talk, Naruto whispered. Jiraiya's face took on a serious expression for an instant before adopting a suave grin. It looks like at least one young man has decided to take my advice on how to crush men and woo women, he announced, making Naruto face fault this time. The amused crowd were then treated to watching the two men bicker back and forth until they stood far enough out of everyone's earshot. Iruka picked that moment to herd his students away, asking Hinata, Ino, Shikamaru, Choji, Shino, and Kiba to remain behind. It's good to see you and thanks for jumping in when you did, Ero-sennin. Naruto began contritely as he peeled off a piece of flesh-colored paper stuck to his left forearm. The fox is not going to be happy having all her chakra in my system forced back into her suddenly though, he added as he flipped the paper over, revealing a chakra-suppressing seal drawn on it, and studied it for a moment. At this time, there was a rush in his head as the severed mental link with a slightly annoyed demon fox restored itself. Fucking goddamn it! That old pervert did it again, didn't he? Tell him to get his ass in here and I'll show him how gently I suppress a human like him. Kurama roared after she got over the discomfort of having her chakra forced back into her all at once, and then having it drawn out again when Naruto's chakra flow was restored to normal. Her container grimaced as she continued to rant. She say anything nice about me, Gaki? Jiraiya slyly said with a grin at Naruto's face. Yeah, considering you like having your nads stomped on by angry women, she's saying very nice things about what she was going to do with your equipment. He deadpanned. For the last time, I'm not a masochist, the older man defended. By the way, what are you doing here a week early? The younger man completely ignored Jiraiya's indignation. I have to report something to Sensei and do some Fuinjutsu business. Then I figured I'd catch up on my research on this village's young and supple beauties, and enjoy relaxing a little, Jiraiya said with a leer on his idea of research. Naruto nodded his acceptance at the explanation, not bothered he was just blatantly told his godfather was going to peek on naked women. If you're going to talk to Hokage-Jiji, pass this on. Danzo had one of his minions tailing me for a few weeks, I don't know what for though, and I sent the guy packing in the end. I didn't tell Hokage-Jiji yet because I wanted to avoid giving Danzo a reason to cause trouble if he thinks I'm going to him about this. He spoke, and then stepped back under the Toad Sage's angry glare. He had to admit he would never get used to his godfather's sharp glare, since it was terrifying. Oh, he did, huh? Good thing I told you about him. I never did like that old relic, thinking he's doing us all a favor by trying to destroy other villages for no reason other than to have Konoha be the only one left standing. Good job on being careful, Gaki. Jiraiya praised, but he still wasn't happy that Danzo had decided to take an interest in his godson after all. Naruto cleared his throat to move things along. Anyway, that wasn't why I got you out here to chat. I want to tell my friends. I'm tired of keeping secrets from them, and I know I can trust them not to let any of my secrets out to the public. Okay, sure. Now I know it's difficult for you and Hokage-Jiji to accept this, but I promise Gaki, I said okay already. Jiraiya interrupted with clear amusement in his voice. Naruto was confused for a second before his eyes lit up. I can? That easily? Sarutobi-sensei said, since I am legally your godfather, I get a say in whatever personal secrets you can reveal or not. It's not all up to him anymore, even the one about the Kyuubi. Of course, he strongly recommended any of this was to be kept discreet for your safety and this village's. He was about to say more when he was tackled by Naruto around his waist in a hug. Thank you, Jiraiya. You have no idea how relieved I am about this. Naruto calling Jiraiya by just his name made the older man warm and fuzzy on the inside, but he wasn't about to admit that to anyone. Well, get off before it gets too sappy. He grumbled good-naturedly before they broke apart, and walked back to Naruto's assembled friends and Iruka. Everyone, I want to introduce you guys to one of my sensei, Jiraiya of the legendary Sannin, also known as the Super Pervert. Jiraiya posed comically at the introduction to some laughter. His friends weren't surprised since he told them about Jiraiya earlier. However, Iruka was stunned beyond belief. He now understood why Naruto was so strong. The blonde checked the surroundings to ensure no eavesdroppers were around and cleared his throat. Also, he's my godfather appointed by my parents. Yes, I do know who they were, and have known for a while," he added nonchalantly. Despite that, this was an absolute shock to everyone. Not even Hinata knew this yet. After a long moment of everyone mulling over this new information, Shino, of all people, tersely cut into the silence. Everyone were surprised at the normally quiet and stoic boy's directness. If he was appointed as your godfather by your parents, then did that mean they were close to him? They were like my son and daughter. Jiraiya replied sadly in fond remembrance. This only made Shino even more unsettled, as evidenced by a low buzz emitting from the hive of bugs inside his body. "Excuse me for a moment, please," he said abruptly before walking away to a nearby batch of trees. Everyone stood in confused silence as they stared at him disappearing behind a tree. Silence reigned for a minute before it was broken by a high-pitched scream that made everyone flinch. "Dear Cammy, it's him. He really does exist." Dead silence followed the outburst for a long moment as everyone stared at the tree in shock when Shino reappeared from behind it, looking as stoic as before, and walked back to the bemused group. He then cleared his throat while his bugs were still buzzing lowly, apparently indicating his inner turmoil. Father spoke of how close Jiraiya-sama was to one blonde-haired young man, who was his student, as well as a young woman who would be the student's eventual wife. I believe I may have figured out who Naruto-san's parents were, and I am at a complete loss about why I didn't automatically link the woman's last name to Naruto-san's until now. He and Jiraiya-sama apparently agree with what I just said if their expressions were to indicate anything. The sober expressions on Naruto's and Jiraiya's faces confirmed Shino's words. Who were they? Kiba solemnly asked, totally opposite from his usually loud and impatient tone. Choji and Shikamaru seemed to be coming to a conclusion in their minds and their eyes widened. Ino and Hinata held their hands up to their mouth, anxiously awaiting the revelation. Iruka's dark irises shrank to tiny dots as he realized the connection, remembering a flash of long and beautiful red hair from when he was a kid. I was told the woman was Uzumaki Kushina, a famous kunoichi that was also known as red-hot-blooded habanero for her terrifying skills with Fuinjutsu, a special brand of jutsu called chakra chains, and her temper. The man dash. Shino paused at this point and took in a deep breath. The man was Namikaze Minato. As an apprentice of Jiraiya-sama, he became so powerful he would go on to almost single-handedly win the Third Great Shinobi War against IWA, and became a beloved hero to all of Konohagakure. After the war, he was known internationally as the Yellow Flash and succeeded the Sandame as the Yandame Hokage. At this point, thuds were heard as all but Jiraiya, Naruto, and Shino, who was buzzing loudly and barely standing, fell over in dead faint. Naruto palmed his face and let out a deep sigh while Jiraiya scratched his chin for a moment, not at all concerned about the unconscious bodies. Now that I see it, you're an Aburame, and if I'm correct from your physical traits, your father was Shibi-san? Shino could only nod once, not able to speak for now. I remember now. Minato always mentioned he came to your father for advice, and considered him a good friend. Advice? Good friend? That was too much for Shino. He fell backward and joined the others in a dead faint as well. Somehow, he did it stoically with a rigid posture and his hands still in his coat's pockets. Naruto glared at a sheepish Jiraiya with an accusing expression. Were you trying to make sure all of them fainted, Ero-sennin? I was just saying. The Aburame clan, for all their logic, always held a special place in their hearts for Minato. He never once looked at any of them as if they were freaks for using bugs and always worked closely with them. He was a big part of why many of this boy's clan are now included in tracking and hunting squads. Before then, they were viewed as very specialized, only known publicly for destroying Suna's puppets' corps in the Second Great War, since most of them just enlisted in the ANBU and slipped into obscurity for the rest of their lives. Minato brought the clan more into the spotlight and let people see what else they could do, and they were all much better for it. Naruto smiled proudly at yet another great deed done by his father. He glanced over at his unconscious friends and chuckled softly. Wait till they hear about the fox, he muttered with a slightly worried grin. Jiraiya grinned and put a hand on his godson's head. It'll be okay, he assured sincerely. At the same time in the academy's medic office. There you go. You're a little banged up, but you should be good as new after a couple days as long as you take it easy, a silver-haired part-time medic said cheerfully as he patted a hand on Sasuke's knee. Sasuke, who was half covered in bandages, just glared at him and only grunted as he slid off the medical table. He limped out without even a word of thanks. That arrogant ass. The cheerful medic's tone instantly turned dark. Mizuki, who was leaning against the wall by the office's door, shrugged as he closed it to talk privately. Give him a break, Kabuto. He just got a thorough thrashing from the demon brat. I don't know why everyone won't see that brat's sudden increase in skills as a sign the Kyuubi's forcing itself out finally. He said this as if it was nothing but the truth. Because you're a moron. Kabuto muttered quietly under his breath as he turned back to his desk and wrote down his observations of the Uchiha specimen on a separate and secret file to forward to his master. He smirked in satisfaction as he finished writing. He knew his master would be very pleased with the fact Sasuke was easily susceptible to anger and thirst for power now. A perfect candidate for his master's new version of the Cursed Seal. So did you hear anything new about any of the students here over the past week? Kabuto finally inquired of the nearly useless henchman standing behind as he continued to do his work at the desk. Nothing different except for one thing. I overheard some people talking about how that demon brat usually leaves the village for somewhere far away every summer. Good riddance, I say. 3 months without him around each year is better than nothing. The blue-haired man spat out hatefully. I find it hard to believe they would let a jinchuriki leave the village that long for any reason. Please tell me you at least know the reason. Kabuto muttered, already knowing Mizuki wasn't competent enough to dig up more information. No clue. It's hard enough talking about the demon brat in any way in this building without that old man breathing down our necks, he said with a shrug. The silver-haired man expelled a suffering sigh. We're done here. I have more work to do, so get out. He spoke dismissively, not even bothering to care about the small scowl on Mizuki's face as the idiot stepped out of the office. Soon back with Naruto and friends, Naruto shifted nervously under the silent and incredulous stares of his friends just after he had finished revealing his role as the Kyuubi's container. Only 2 weren't surprised, and they were Hinata and Irika, since they already knew. Though they were still reeling from the revelation of Naruto's parentage earlier. Ino's voice was the one to break the silence. Is it really true? Was that why most of the civilians seemed to hate you? Naruto sighed and nodded silently, awaiting his longtime friend's reactions. He almost flinched when his male friends and Ino frowned, before the platinum blonde suddenly hopped forward to surprise him with a heartfelt hug. Naruto! Why didn't you tell us earlier? I don't care about that, but it's obvious it's been eating you up inside keeping this from us for so long, she exclaimed as she squeezed her arms around his neck to almost choke him in irritation. Troublesome. And here I was thinking you've been hiding something truly suspicious. Instead, it's something stupid like that, Shikamaru added with a smirk. Choji nodded assertively next to him. No wonder why you smell strongly like a fox, Kiba teased. I understand what it is like when people blindly fear what they do not comprehend, due to my clan keeping hives in their bodies. Rest assured this will not change my view of you, Naruto-san, Shino commented stoically. Naruto could only respond with a warm smile as his friends began to bombard him with questions. Hinata and Irika were standing back with happy grins, glad that this revelation went well. Jiraiya, standing behind Naruto, turned and began to leave with a smile, knowing he wasn't needed for now. Meanwhile, a certain young woman began to form ideas in her head. Knowing who Naruto's parents were changed everything, and she couldn't help but anticipate what were to come soon as certain clan bylaws instantly became relevant now. She glanced over at Ino, who still had her arms around Naruto even as she scolded him more, and had to smile, feeling like this wasn't going to be a bad thing. 30 minutes later at Kabuto's apartment, Kabuto entered with a loud yawn, genuinely tired from his day's work. This was one of the few nights in which he didn't have to do any secret work for Orochimaru, and just enjoyed being a lone bachelor returning home from work to relax. However, that thought was ruined when he scowled upon feeling a presence in his apartment. Have you forgotten I have bad history with that bastard? I'm already itching to rip your body apart this very minute, so hurry up and deliver your message before I send you back to your master in pieces. Kabuto called out with a homicidal expression forming and his hands twitching at his sides. The studio apartment was dark and somewhat sparse, with a bed in one corner, a small kitchen and table in another, and an exercise area in the last one. A black-clad hand popped out of a shadow near the kitchen table to put a small scroll on it before it retreated. Almost immediately after that, the presence disappeared from the apartment completely, and Kabuto frowned at this sudden development. Root rarely contacted him directly, and it was only done if they wanted to get something to Orochimaru quickly. Walking over to the table and picking up the scroll, he carefully checked it for any possible trap before finally opening it. What he read on the scroll made his eyes go wider with each passing line. He smirked evilly at the end as he closed the scroll with a snap. How convenient that the information I wanted would just drop into my hands like this. Orochimaru-sama is going to want to know about this immediately. It's too bad this Uzumaki brat is for the other side. Being someone who got under Danzo's skin this easily, I would have gotten along well with him. Hokage's office at around the same time. "Yo, Sarutobi-sensei!" Jiraiya called out as he climbed into the office through an open window. Hiruzen Sarutobi looked up from paperwork on his desk and smiled. "Jiraiya-kun, it's so good to see you again after last year. I hear you managed to stop a little schoolyard scuffle on the way here." The third greeted as he leaned back into his chair. Jiraiya snorted loudly as he leaned against the wall next to the desk. A scuffle? Gaki was ready to cripple or kill the Uchiha spawn for real. I was going to let him after hearing that shitstain call his mother a whore. Seeing that he was willing to put others at risk with his jutsu only added more to that, but then I remembered those pesky little laws. Jiraiya grumbled. Hiruzen frowned at the Uchiha's poor choice of words and actions today. "I'll be reviewing the incident, then I will hand out some punishment to Sasuke-san and dock pay from Mizuki-san for changing up the pairings without permission. Doubt that'll really teach them. Anyway, I'm not here for that. I came across some information I think you need to know." Jiraiya's face turned grave. Hiruzen waved his hand dismissively, and his ANBU guards moved out of the office before he activated a seal on the desk for privacy between him and Jiraiya, who grinned and spoke. "Before we begin on that, I thought I should tell you I allowed Gaki to tell his friends and Yumino-san his secrets." "I see. Thank you for telling me. You were a lot more nervous the last time we talked on this topic. Now you're strangely calm, sensei," Jiraiya observed with a raised eyebrow. The old man let out a sigh as he steepled his hands on the desk. "I've had some time to think about this. With Naruto-kun getting strong so fast, he'll be Chunin before we know it, and I'll be required by his parents will to pass their possessions on to that young man. At that point, the cat'll be out of the bag anyway. The only real worry from all of this is Iwa's reaction. However, we're now back to full strength military-wise and we would be able to stand up to any nation now. Plus, the mental blow of an offspring of the Yellow Flash having had time to grow up and come into his own as a powerful shinobi will be almost too much for Iwa's morale from the very onset. Anoki-san's a famous fence-sitter for a reason. If he doesn't feel the situation to be in his favor, he usually wouldn't do anything no matter how much his entire village calls for Naruto-kun's head. As long Naruto-kun's friends keep it quiet, and this doesn't spread like wildfire, he should be okay until he's good and ready for the world to throw anything at him in a few years. You make good points, sensei. When all of this comes out, you want to make a bet the Gaki won't blow his top when we tell him he'll be allowed and strongly encouraged to take on multiple wives since he needs to pass on the Uzumaki traits and restore his clan? Jiraiya replied with an evil grin. Hiruzen chuckled. No, I know a fool's bet when I see one. The two men smiled before they sighed. How did Naruto-kun's friends take it? The third queried. They were upset that Gaki was being hated for something so stupid. Indeed. There are times when I felt the younger people are smarter than the older and more experienced people. Hiruzen said sagely with a proud smile for the maturity of Naruto and his friends. A moment of silence descended on the office. The Toad Sage then sighed loudly before he became all business. Moving on to more serious matters. I came across some worrying information in Land of Earth about a powerful mercenary group taking up some nasty missions for the Tsuchikage, and they were completing them easily at an alarming rate. Jiraiya's expression became grim. Sounds like any other top-rate mercenary group. I assume that's not all there is to them, however. According to the rumors I heard, they comprise of S-rank missing nin, and they're linked to the Bijou in some ways. They're trying to increase their funds rapidly by taking on missions no one sane would want. Hebe Team used to be part of this group for a short time before I heard he betrayed them. They're now frantically hunting him down since he has something that belonged to them. That's something different. What do they want with the Bijou? I don't know, but I will tell you right now. A group of S-rank missing nin having something to do with even just one of the Bijou, let alone more? Nothing good will ever come out of that. Jiraiya said gravely with his eyes set in a sharp glare. Should we warn Naruto-kun? Hiruzen said wearily with a sigh. Jiraiya shook his head. Gaki should focus on being a carefree teen for just a little while longer. Right now this is just mostly rumors and I'd rather wait till I confirm this group and its ultimate goal before I go to the Gaki with this. He will need to know soon, no question about that, but not right now. Anything else? Gaki told me that he had a tail on him for a few weeks a while back. He said he sent the guy packin', and it turns out he was sent by your old teammate. Jiraiya had to consciously force himself to not step back under his sensei's sharp glare. Danzo sent someone after Naruto-kun? The third repeated, his voice rough. It looked like it was just to gather information if nothing else. Gaki said he didn't want to tell you directly and risk any unpredictable reaction from Danzo. That's why he hasn't been by lately. The third concluded, his expression showing he did not like Danzo interfering with Naruto's regular visits to his office. They usually brightened his days. He let out a sigh and stood up to walk over to a file cabinet. We'll worry about that soon enough. For now, I have to read this report, and then go to an emergency Shinobi Council meeting later this evening to discuss a mission that went wrong. You're welcome to come along as a stand-in guard if you'd like to listen in. Perhaps you might have heard something from one of your spies, Hiruzen offered as he began to gather some folders and a small rectangular object into his hands. Jiraiya was an old-school shinobi, but he recognized that object as a mission recorder that seamlessly attached to any shinobi's radio unit. It was a new technology that came to Konoha only a while ago. It also was so expensive only commanders carried them, and only on dangerous missions. It was the best option that way since all radio communication in a squad was routed through the commander's unit anyway. The device then would record up to the last hour of radio chatter. It was useful for investigators dealing with incidents on missions, and when they were lucky enough to recover the recorder one way or another after failed missions resulting in total loss of life. Must have been a major incident on this particular mission to call the council together. Is it someone I know? Jiraiya frowned upon seeing his sensei's grave expression. It's completed, but out of the 5 nin we sent out, only 1 returned alive with minor injuries. Midarashi Anko. On a street in Konoha in the evening. Why don't you come right up to Naruto and tell him what you really think, huh? Ino snarled fiercely at yet another villager that glared at Naruto with hatred. The woman recoiled in shock at being called out and scampered off. Naruto sighed as he watched Ino and Kiba glare and growl at every villager that even looked their way. Hinata, Shino, Shikamaru, and Choji were quietly walking behind Naruto, but they were also giving off their own chilly dispositions toward all the villagers around them. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing by telling you. He spoke in a half-amused and half-exasperated tone. Of course you did. We finally understand what's going on with you. Now that we know, we don't want you to put up with any more bullshit you don't deserve from those people. Kiba shot back hotly. Not even the Kyuubi deserves all the blame if what you said happened that night was true. Ino added in a whisper. Naruto smiled gratefully at his friend's protectiveness. Kiba, Ino, and everyone else, thank you, but I grew up with these looks. I'm used to them. I don't even notice them until you guys started acting up on my behalf. It's honestly not hurting me or anything now. But it's not fair, Naruto. You're the dash. Ino was stunned into silence by a sharp glare from Naruto. Please do not finish that out here in the public, Ino-chan. Just as most of the people here think I don't deserve to be here, they do not deserve to know where I truly came from until it's time. Do not give them any excuse to turn around and beg me for my forgiveness just because my father was him. I don't need that crap, please. Ino snapped her mouth shut and nodded demurely. Kiba seemed to have gotten the message too as he began to silently walk next to Naruto. The blonde sighed. I knew this was going to take some adjustment for you, and I'm sorry I snapped like that, guys. I may be their son, but I'm sure even if they were alive, they would tell me to be my own person. I don't need you guys acting like I'm the son of 2 famous nin who automatically deserves the entire village bowing at his feet until their knees bleed. I need you to be Uzumaki Naruto's friends and nothing else. You're the reason the looks I'm getting from these idiots aren't bothering me at all. I'm happy with you guys, and that's all I want, he assured his now beaming friends. Well, almost all of them were beaming while Shino just nodded his head curtly. Ino and Hinata hopped on Naruto with their bone-crushing hugs while the boys watched with grins. I'm starving. Let's go eat at the ramen stand, Naruto announced as he got out of the girls' clutches and sped off toward the stand with his friends close behind. An hour later at the ramen stand. Alas, I must go, my love, or you would tempt me so and break my steely resolve otherwise. I shall return for you in a few days after I have had time to recover from being in your presence. Naruto muttered lovingly to a stack of empty ramen bowls with his hands held together in a prayer. A grinning Ayame with pink cheeks was watching this with great amusement as she leaned on the counter across from him. You know, Naruto-kun, if you had said that to me instead, I would have fallen for you. You may be able to get a ramen cook as your girlfriend, she teased. Naruto chuckled as he pushed the bowls aside. I'm flattered, and thank you for your wonderful cooking as usual. However, I think with your beauty and cooking, it might be too much of a good thing for me and I'll die early. Happy, but too early, he replied in a teasing tone with a genuine smile as he took his Gamachan wallet out to pay. He didn't notice the young woman's cheeks darkening further at his unintentional compliments. A minute later, he was waving bye to Ayam and Tucci as he made his way back to his apartment alone since his friends had already left in a group for their homes in the clan district. A short while later, he made his way into his apartment building. Well, Kurama, this has been a long day, but I'm glad things went well. All my friends now know, and they're okay with it. You also handled that Uchiha bastard nicely. Your training is going well. Naruto beamed as he climbed up the stairs to his apartment before he nearly face-faulted off the steps upon Kurama's next words. However, I haven't forgotten how you questioned my gender once again. I will be riding your ass hard tonight. Naruto grimaced while the demon fox fell silent as she smacked a hand to her face. That might not be the best choice of words to use with the context of this conversation. Just shut up and get home, was all the fox muttered out. Naruto smiled as he reached his floor, but the smile dropped when he noticed an odd shape in front of his door. He became instantly alert because the hallway was dimly lit, and he couldn't make out the shape yet. He silently took a kunai out of his leg holster and held it loosely out of sight behind his leg. He silenced his steps and slowed his breathing. He then made himself as small a target as possible when he shifted his body sideways and almost pressed his back to the wall on the opposite side from his door. He then inched closer to the shape, keeping it in his sight at all time as he glanced around and up for any ambush or trap. Get ready to pump your chakra into me if I have trouble. It'd alert all the shinobi in this village to hear. That'd be a good idea if this was a real threat. Sniff a bit harder, and you'll recognize the scent, Kurama pointed out. Confused at her words, he let himself focus on his sense of smell. Mixed in with the usual stagnant sense of the hallway, there was a fresh soapy scent, and he realized there was a familiar scent of snakes mixed in. Relaxing his guard a little, he got close enough to find it was Anko sitting with her back against his door. Her legs were tightly drawn up to her chest with her arms wrapped under the knees, and she was rocking back and forth a little bit with her face down and shaded. She was dressed in a simple dark blue t-shirt and a pair of plaid flannel pants. She apparently just got out of the shower from the clean scent he smelled off her. He also noticed her damp hair was down, much to his secret delight. His favorite physical feature on her was always her beautiful purple hair, and it put him in a good mood whenever she left it down. Very good. You made sure to stay alert and prepared everything correctly in order to minimize the danger to you in case this was a trap. Her dull voice cut into Naruto's thoughts as she praised his alertness. Her face was still hidden. Anko-chan, you're finally back. I missed you, you know, Naruto said happily as he put his kunai away and stepped forward. That was the last thing he did before he was violently slammed against the wall by Anko's arm across his chest, and her other hand was suddenly holding the same kunai he just put away against his neck, ready to slice. Before he could wonder how she snatched that kunai without him noticing, he was stunned by an expression of pure rage on her face. Anko-chan? He refused to believe his friend would actually do anything to him, so he moved on to thinking about the reason for her distress. He also knew the rage he was seeing wasn't directed at him but at the world in general, since he recognized the same look he saw in the mirror from when he was younger. You shouldn't let your guard down. What if I betray you? What if I think you'll betray me? Anko shouted as her expression changed from rage to desperate paranoia as she still held the kunai up to Naruto's neck, although it was trembling now. Anko-chan, something's happened during this mission you just did, didn't it? Naruto whispered gently, and he knew he got it right when Anko flinched violently. Her crazed light brown eyes focused on him as if she was seeing him for the first time this evening. She lowered her gaze and chuckled weakly in a dull tone before he felt the kunai move away from his neck, and her arm pinning his chest was trembling now. He slowly brought his hands up to show he wasn't doing anything as he watched her face contort and change through a mixture of raw emotions before it finally settled on pure despair, and she raised the kunai once again, poised to strike. Her eyes became crazed again as she shifted her gaze back up at Naruto's. The fuckers gave me up as sacrifice. The same people who I worked with for weeks and actually made me think they were decent turned around and thunk, stabbed me in the back without a second thought. Every single one of them did it with a smile, and they had no goddamn remorse until they were slaughtered a few seconds later. She whispered frantically into Naruto's stunned face as she loudly sunk the kunai into the wall next to Naruto's head when she spat out stabbed. He didn't pay that any mind as he tried to make sense of what could have happened to her. Whoever they were, they're not here anymore because you just said they're dead. Instead, I'm here and it's okay, Anko-chan. You have nothing to worry about with me. He spoke softly as he slowly moved his right hand up and patted gently on her arm, pinning him. Anko flinched at the touch but seemed to calm down as she let out a choked sob and threw the kunai to the floor with a clatter, before releasing him. She stumbled back clumsily with a dead expression and was about to sink to her knees when Naruto quickly moved to support her with an arm around her waist. Let's go in and I'll give you some of my tea. You like that, right? We'll talk when you're ready, he said soothingly, and Anko nodded weakly. He then unlocked and opened his door before going in with the listless woman in his arms. At around the same time in a secure meeting room, a large door opened to admit Hiruzen Sarutobi and his most trusted student, Jiraiya. The large room fell silent as everyone already in the room all stood at attention for their leader while the door closed and locked with a click. At ease, the third said succinctly as he briskly walked to and took his seat at the end of the long and well-lit conference table in the middle of the room. Everyone else then took their seats and Jiraiya silently stood guard to the right and behind the Hokage, his eyes searching the room. The entire Shinobi Council was in attendance as Jiraiya noted the clan heads from Hyuga, Yamanaka, Aburame, Akimichi, Inuzuka, and a few others. In addition, there were the commanders from the three main branches of the military: the secretive dragon of ANBU, the scarred and grizzled Marino Ibiki of intelligence, and Naro Shikaku, the Jounin commander of the main force. Shikaku actually was here in double capacity as the commander and as the Nara clan head. To round out the assembly, Hiruzen's old teammates, Hamura Mikokado and Koharu Udatane, sat on both sides of the Hokage as his advisors. Jiraiya, I didn't know you were back in the village, Koharu observed from her seat as she noticed the tall man behind Hiruzen. Hello, Koharu-san. I came back here for other business, but Sensei here invited me along by chance. He believes I might have some insight to offer into the subject of this meeting. Jiraiya greeted with a polite smile. I trust none of you would mind Jiraiya-kun being here? The Hokage spoke with a gentle smile, but everyone at the table knew what he really meant behind that smile. If you actually have any issue with that, tough shit. No one said anything as the Hokage took out some files in a folder that was sitting in front of him on the table. The others followed suit and took their own copies out of their folders as well. No one spoke for a few minutes, with the crinkling of papers the only sound filling the room as all quickly read over their reports. The third cleared his throat. I just read over a mission report from one Mitarashi Anko, who returned earlier today with minor injuries. However, the 4 nin assigned to her for this mission were killed in action. We believe a major incident has occurred during this A-rank mission, which I commissioned to find and eliminate a large group of missing nin causing trouble near the capital. He paused to let all that sink in. What I read in the loss of 4 of our men had me decide to call this meeting in order to go over the profiles of all 5 shinobi involved and discuss the mission's progress reports leading up to the incident. We will then discuss the evidence, and I expect to hear any advice or objection as I decide what to do in the aftermath. He finished gravely as he looked each of the assembled council in the eyes. Hokage-sama, you mentioned Mitarashi-san had just returned today. Don't we need some time to gather information and pieces of evidence if there were any? Yet you say we have enough already to hear the case this evening. Shikaku cut in politely. He knew there was a mission recorder involved and he wanted to establish that early in the meeting. Yes, I believe we have enough on the advice of Ibiki-san, who has looked over the evidence, a mission recorder, for any sign of tampering or falsehood. He has declared it completely genuine. The third replied with a nod in the direction of the intelligence head. Ibiki nodded back curtly. He was stoic on the outside, but he was boiling with rage on the inside against the ones who hurt one of his favorite comrades. We should begin then. It seems like this might be a long night for all of us. Hayashi put in as some of the council nodded at the truth of that. Ibiki then took out a stack of folders. These are the profiles of the 5 that were involved in the incident. I believe we should establish their personalities before we discuss the evidence, which is a recording of radio communication recovered from this mission. He said gruffly. Should we trust this kind of gadgetry so quickly? Hamura cut in as he shifted a little uncomfortably. He was always distrustful of new technology. Koharu nodded her agreement. I did just establish Ibiki-san cleared the evidence to be entirely accurate. You are welcome to take it up with him if you'd like, however. The Hokage retorted with a half-smirk. Hamura and Koharu gulped when they received Ibiki's challenging glare, and said nothing in the end. If there's nothing else, please begin, Ibiki-san, Hokage ordered as he leaned back in his chair with Jiraiya silently watching over the meeting. The first profile we have here is Jounin Midarashi Enko, who was born October 24th and her current age is 19. She was orphaned at one upon the deaths of her parents in an attack by IWA as the Third Great War gained full momentum. Naruto's apartment. Here you go, Naruto said gently as he put a cup of tea on the coffee table in front of Enko. He had to hold in a sigh at the sight of her. Enko hadn't said anything or moved a single inch from where he helped set her down on the living room couch. She truly looked like a breeze would knock her over. He slowly sat in a chair opposite the couch and kept an eye on his guest. After what seemed like hours but only minutes passed, he was happy to note Enko slowly reaching for the cup. He then watched her pick it up and bring it her lips for a sip. He grinned in victory as she fluttered her eyes closed, and her expression clearly showed contentment at the taste. She let out a blissful sigh and seemed to be somewhat revitalized. I've always loved your tea. There's just something about coming home from a tough mission and enjoying a couple cups with you lately. Cammy, I really needed this after what just happened, she murmured as she sank back into the back cushion of the couch and tucked her legs in underneath her to get comfortable with the cup cradled in her hands. Thanks. Apparently something didn't go right. Ha! That's the understatement of the year. Everything was foobar. Enko scoffed as she took another sip. I realize I may not be the best person to talk to since I'm not even in the force yet. Is Yugao-san around? Maybe she can help, he offered, but Enko shook her head. She's out on a mission, and even if she was around, she mumbled at the end. But Naruto clearly heard it with his sensitive hearing, and it made him smile inwardly. I want to see you either way. I'll try to help any way I can, he said sincerely as he sat back in his chair for a long talk. Enko smiled gratefully. Just listening is enough. Right now I feel like you, Yugao, and Nai-chan are the only ones in the world that would never betray me, she said softly, with her eyes dulling slightly as she seemed to be remembering something. I've got all the time in the world for you right now. Just say whatever you'd like, Naruto replied with an encouraging smile. I suppose I should start at the beginning. You know, the old man told me to go after some missing nin comprised mostly of genin and chunin from various villages. They banded together up north and were causing troubles with raids on small villages around the capital. Old man told me to whittle down their number carefully and slowly over time. He gave me a squad of 4 guys. They were seasoned chunin who could handle most things as long as they worked together. I can't say their names now because of what happened, and the old man ordered me to not reveal their identities. We met each other, and you can imagine that things got a little tense between us because I'm the snake whore and they're such upstanding and devoted nin concerned about the integrity of the shinobi force. You know, the usual dance. Old man ordered us to work together and get over our differences since we knew this mission would take weeks. Enko paused with a shrug and took another sip of tea before continuing in what looked like fond remembrance. We had our little kinks to work out. Even got into a row or two when they questioned my orders, and I had to assert my rank. However, we eventually smoothed everything out and we worked together like a well-oiled machine. We started completing our objectives at a quick rate as we hunted down the missing nin. In the beginning, there were 32 of them. We cut that number down to 13 over the past 3 weeks of careful planning and a surgical strike each time we split some of them from the herd. We laughed and ate together like old friends during the quiet times. I was beginning to like them, and even thought it would be nice to work with them on more missions in the future. That all changed yesterday. Her expression darkened as she paused to take a breath. Naruto leaned in to listen intently. Council room, we have established the personalities of the 5 involved in this incident. We also discussed the progress reports Midarashi-san sent in over the course of the 3 weeks they were out on the field. Hiruzen summarized the progress of the meeting so far before continuing. Is there anything any of you would like to add? It sounded like a typical long-term mission for a 5-man squad. Everyone had their differences according to the initial progress reports. They smoothed out their kinks by the end of the first week, however, and began completing their objectives at a good rate. Instead of the allocated 6 weeks, it looked like they would have completed the mission in just 4. I have to say Mitarashi Enko makes a good squad commander if she was able to keep her squad in order and moving along at a brisk rate, in spite of the general opinion of her. The masked ANBU dragon spoke calmly, voice distorted by the mask. Only one person in the entire village knew Dragon's identity, and that was the Hokage. Hiruzen frowned at Dragon's mention of Anko's unfortunate public opinion and mentally wondered how long it was going to take for people to forget that she was the student of the traitor Orochimaru. Indeed, it is difficult to fathom that this incident happened the way it did from the reports we read. Aburain clan head Shibi put in his opinion and the others quietly murmured their agreement. Hiruzen waved his hand at Ibiki, who stood up and moved to a corner of the room to retrieve an electronic device. When he returned, he set it on the table for everyone to see. It was obvious from the visible speaker it was designed to play back a recording. This is why I called this meeting. Because of the conflict between the previous progress reports and the final mission report Mitarashi-san turned in today, we need to establish the truth once and for all with this recording. The third explained as he retrieved the mission recorder from inside his Haori and handed it to Jiraiya. The Toad Sage silently walked over to Ibiki and handed the item to him in full view of everyone. Ibiki then slowly pushed the recorder into a slot on the device. After a nod from the Hokage, Ibiki pressed play and the device came to life with a crackle. SW Main, this is SW01 reporting objective complete. We have 2 confirmed dead. A male voice filled the room. A snort was heard from Shikaku and everyone looked in his direction with inquisitive expressions. It seems Mitarashi-san has a sense of humor. Most squad leaders use their initials to form call signs among their squads. In her case, it would have been MA. However, she's using SW, apparently from one of her more popular nicknames among the populace, Snake Whore. He spoke with an amused smirk. Most of the council's jaws dropped at the sheer audacity while the Hokage slapped a hand to his forehead in exasperation. Jiraiya and Sum were doing all they could to not laugh uproariously. Dragon's shoulders shook slightly, and Ibiki grinned with respect for his subordinate. It took a minute for everyone settled down, and the recording was still playing, but it was just radio banter for now. The recorder only automatically activated whenever there were chatter, so weeks' worth of radio communication were reduced to minutes for all assembled since the recording cut out the hours that normally passed between radio chatters. They listened for a few minutes and they could tell Enko and her men were getting along really well and they were efficiently completing their operations. If the incident hadn't happened, Hokage believed he would have assigned them to her often in the future. Finally they got to the important part, and everyone fell deathly silent. SW Main here. Sound check and confirmation from all. This is a recon mission. Do not engage any enemy you may see around the bunker. We are to only gather information today. Enko's voice ordered firmly. SW01 confirms, which was followed by 3 other males' voices confirming their orders. Ibiki paused the device at this point. According to the report, they were casing an abandoned bunker from the Third Great War that was located 35 km northwest of the capital, near the border. They believe that bunker to either be the main base of operation or at least house several missing Nin. They were investigating to confirm before taking further action. At this point, Mitarashi-sen was controlling the operation from their hidden camp 3 kilometers away using an up-to-date map while the 4 men investigated. He reported from his paper before resuming playback. SW Main here. SW01 and SW03 are to move to grid K7 on the east side of the bunker and find cover. Watch for any activity. SW02 and SW04 cover the other 2 from the shadows 20 meters behind. Enko's voice continued. Textbook recon procedure. Send 2 people close enough with 2 more watching their backs to avoid any chance of ambush from behind. Shikaku commented. Normal radio banter followed with Enko regularly checking with each of her men and silently moving the team to different locations around the bunker. Apparently a lot of time has passed and SW01 was beginning to get impatient. SW Main, SW01 here and it's been hours, ma'am. We haven't seen anything out of ordinary. Maybe this is a dead end. An impatient male voice cut in. SW01, maintain your position. We still have another 2 hours to go. Enko's slightly irritated voice returned immediately. The next chatter perked up the council's ears. SW01 to all, activity detected. I see a male stepping out the main entrance to the bunker. He looks to be in his late teens with brown hair and a typical Kirin outfit. SW01's voice sounded almost excited. SW03 confirms sighting. SW Main to all, maintain your positions. Keep quiet and observe. SW01 to all, reporting. Another man has followed the first one out in a similar Curie outfit, and they're now smoking cigarettes. SW03 confirms. A smoke break? Could use one myself. SW04's voice muttered. SW01 to all, a third man has come out in an IWA outfit. I heard him joke he was getting lonely in there. SW03 confirms both sight and sound. So there are only 3 here. We can take them easily, SW main. SW main to all, negative. This is recon only. Continue until the time is up and we'll plan accordingly afterward. SW01 to main, with all due respect ma'am, I don't see why we have to wait hours to eliminate them then rather than do it right now. This male's voice was becoming impatient again. I repeat, do not engage. This feels wrong and we need to be sure. Enko's voice rose slightly in alarm. SW main, sorry but that's bullshit. They're sitting ducks out there and we need to take advantage now. They might be joined by more later and we'll miss this chance. SW01's voice growled out and the other men called in with their agreements. The people in the council room scowled at the blatant defiance. It was fine to make your opinion known but orders has to be followed nonetheless if the leader still wouldn't change their mind. Why not just threaten them with insubordination? Choza, head of the Akimuchi clan, chimed in. That's the wrong thing to say in the middle of an active high-tension mission. It would just increase their defiance and embolden them. At this point, they begin thinking if what they did turned out alright, then they'd get off with a slap on the wrist. Threatening them would just piss them off. What you do instead is clearly order them to retreat to a safe distance to make them cool down, and just hope to Kami they'll obey that at least. Ibiki replied crisply, his experience in psychology clear. As if to prove Ibiki right, Enko's terse voice filled the room. SW main to all, everyone is to withdraw quietly back to camp. This recon is over and we have enough information. No, I don't think so. I'm going to eliminate them now before they get back to the others. We'll finish our mission faster this way. SW01's defiant voice cut in and 3 other male voices followed. This is when everything's gone to shit, apparently. Jiraiya muttered for everyone to hear. Solemn agreement went around. They heard Enko take a calming breath. SW main to all, I repeat, everyone is to withdraw right now. She managed to keep her voice calm but everyone knew she lost them as there were no reply this time. Only dead silence and Enko's quickened breathing followed for a few minutes as she kept her radio on to hear for any slightest bit of sound. A loud static exploded into the room making everyone wince. The static eventually gave way to garbled voices that became clear. A fucking ambush. They were waiting for us to kill those 3 before they jumped in. One man's alarmed voice made everyone frown and there were sounds of explosions and metal clanging. They heard Enko's sharp intake of breath. They used them for bait. What kind of comrades does that? Another man's voice cried as he fought off an enemy. There were more clanging and scuffling of feet with some cruel laughter echoing in from somewhere. I'm coming dash. Enko's voice called out but was cut off. Wait. We surrender. Turn off your radios, guys. SW01's voice cut into the radio, chatter loudly. What are you saying? Enko's confusion was apparent as 3 clicks were heard, meaning 3 of the radio units went offline. My radio's busted. SW03's voice was heard somehow, meaning his busted radio was picking up everything without them knowing. Inoichi, head of the Yamanaka clan, held his hand up for Ibiki to briefly pause the playback. So that's what the static from earlier was about. Apparently that man's unit looked damaged to them but was actually permanently on. Do you have confirmation of this? Yes, Mitarashi-san took the bodies back here after the incident, and I checked their radio units. 3 of them were deliberately switched off and the last one had the switch and earpiece torn off by a kunai strike, but the mic was still picking up everything when I recharged the battery and checked. With the earpiece gone, there was no way that man knew his unit was still active. I checked for any sign of tampering but Mitarashi-san never touched anything. Ibiki replied as he looked over his autopsy report. Inoichi nodded his acceptance of the report, and let Ibiki continue playback. What the hell's going on? Enko's voice muttered as she apparently was listening for anything on the other end. There were laughter and some fists striking flesh repeatedly followed by grunts and yells for a few minutes. There was an audible click from Enko's unit as she switched it to permanently on now. Need to keep this on, she whispered offhandedly as clattering was heard from her end. It was apparent she was quickly gathering her supplies and getting ready to move. You took your sweet time killing most of us over the past 3 weeks. What makes you think we want to have you surrender? A gruff man's voice echoed. I want to join you. SW01's voice was heard and Anko couldn't contain a gasp. Everyone in the council scowled as they heard the other men's agreement. Uproarious laughter filled the room for a moment. You guys may be good, but it doesn't change the fact that you killed so many of us that only 10 of us are left now. Whatever you say isn't going to be enough, and we'll enjoy killing you slowly over next 3 weeks. The same amount of time you spent trying to slowly choke life out of us. The apparent leader of the missing Nin growled menacingly. Okay. Weapons check. Scrolls check. Anko mumbled to herself as she prepared to rescue her squad, only to be stopped cold by what she heard on the radio. What if we have a kunoichi waiting for us back at camp? SW01 added. Now this stopped the laughter and chattering echoing over the radio, and everything was silent. Anko's stunned gasp of disbelief wretched at some of the council's hearts, and growls were heard in the room. Oh? Do tell. The leader's voice sounded really interested. That's why I had us turn off the radio. So she wouldn't hear this back at the camp, and you can ambush her and have your way with her however much you want. We've been putting up with her for weeks, trying to keep things friendly between us, but we don't care about her. We're doing our now former village a favor by getting rid of her. Consider it a peace offering from us if you let us live and join you. SW01's voice continued in an excited tone, believing he was getting out of this one alive. A weak thump was heard as it sounded like Anko sank to her knees on the ground in shock. The all-male band of missing Nin began to cheer raucously at the prospect of nabbing a kunoichi, some of them commenting they were more fun to break than civilian women. Give me her name, the leader ordered. Mitarashi Anko. SW02's voice supplied, and there were scattered cheers as some of the missing Nin apparently recognized the name. Ooh. She's in the bingo book. B-rank, I believe? I'll bet her picture doesn't do her justice in real life. The leader was talking with the captured males as if they were old friends. You have no idea. She's clearly one of the most beautiful women in our village, and very feisty. She would be fun for you, I'm sure. SW01's sinister grin was clearly felt in his voice as more of the missing Nin cheered. Anko's voice cut in when she choked back a sob and slowly scuffled to her feet. Don't believe this. She mumbled, and there were clattering from her stumbling around the camp, followed by some sniffling and small sobs. Even the most hardened people at the meeting felt their hearts break for her as they listened to her deal with and force down her feelings of betrayal in order to focus on the issue at hand. Tell us where she is and we'll forgive and forget, the leader requested. The traitors didn't even take a second to think before one of them replied. She's in a clearing 3 kilometers to the south of us, near the river. Ibiki had to stop playback at this point, however, due to an angry Inuzuka-some growling. They gave her up without a second thought to save their own asses. Even though she was the one that got them so far in this godforsaken mission with only few scratches. She snarled as she displayed her clan's beastly traits in full force before turning her fierce gaze on the grim-faced third. They don't deserve to be shinobi of Konoha. Something will be done about this, right? The beautiful Inuzuka clan head growled. I believe we will work that out at the end of this meeting. Please continue. The Hokage sounded disappointed he didn't get to kill these 4 men with his own bare hands. Ibiki resumed playback once again while a still ferocious-looking Tsum forced herself to sit down. Great. Thanks for the information. Go ahead and kill them. The leader's cold voice ordered his cheering comrades. Wait. We gave you the snake, bitch. We agreed you'd let us go. SW01's voice screamed as the other 3 men cried like hysterical children as they struggled to get free. Ripping and spurting were heard as Kanai savagely sliced 3 throats from ear to ear. There were gurgling and the sound of 3 bodies thumping on the ground. A fist struck flesh, followed by the sound of SW01 groaning. We never said we'd let you go. We said we'd forgive and forget, and so we only let you off the 3-week-long torture session we promised. The leader's malicious voice hissed before one more slicing of flesh was heard. A 4th body hit the ground amid the missing Nins cheering. Guys! It's been a long and painful trial, and we had to sacrifice 3 more for bait, but we finally beat them. We also earned ourselves some kunoichi for our troubles too. Let's go before she gets too far away. The leader roared and a stampede was heard. The sound faded as all Nin left the microphone's range on the broken radio attached to SW03's cooling corpse. There was nothing but Anko's shallow breathing for what seemed like eternity to the council. I don't fucking believe this. Worked with them for weeks and they just give me up at first sign of trouble. Fuck him. I should just let the bears in this forest eat and shit them out. Her rambling broke the long moment of silence, now more angry than shocked as she began to move around with more urgency. The council glanced at each other with wariness. She was preparing to face Ten Nin with only a few minutes of planning. That was beyond reckless. They were also reminded at this moment that they have never heard of how a truly furious Mitarashi Anko unencumbered by the curse mark's effects would do, and they were about to find out. They want this, do they? I'm going to make sure it's the very thing they'll curse before they die. Anko's voice was so full of pure unadulterated hate it made some of the council wince. Now there were various sounds as she was apparently setting up traps quickly and hiding herself. Before long, voices started to get louder as the missing Nin approached her position. The group quieted and grumbled when they didn't seem to find the kunoichi they were promised right away. The leader was in the middle of ordering his men to spread out when there was a sound of a blade slicing through flesh and a shrill scream of pain filled the council room, making some raise their eyebrows. The crazy bitch cut his balls off, a man's terrified voice pointed out. While the men in the room groaned at the implication and some stared at the device with obvious revere, Anko's voice laced with insane malice was heard. What my so-called comrades failed to mention is that I'm now A rank in the latest bingo book. I'll show you how I got that ranking, you goddamn pieces of shit. What followed was 15 long minutes of horror that the council wished they didn't have to hear as they listened to 10 men's screams of terror and agony intermixed with slicing flesh, hissing snakes, and Anko's insane cackling about how she was going to make sure they all regretted it. It was apparent Ten Nin wished they'd never been born at that moment. Finally, after everything fell silent, there was only Anko's heavy breathing and it dragged out for a few minutes before she finally mumbled something. I guess this means the mission's complete. Her dead voice lingered in the council room and it sent chills down some spines. There was an audible click when Ibiki turned off the device and then there was dead silence as the entire council just stared at the device as if they expected it to make any more sound. The Hokage cleared his throat. Ibiki-san, what can you tell me about the bodies Mitarashi-san recovered? The 4 Chunin all had their throats sliced ear to ear, which corresponds with what we heard on the recording. As for the bodies of the missing Nin, Ibiki let out a sigh here. Let's just say for some of them I'm going to have to request alternative forms of identification from other hidden villages to confirm their bounties. The others are what I'd call lucky. Lucky? From what we obviously heard on that recording, they're all dead. Some cut in. Exactly. They died quickly enough, and they were still easily recognizable because of that. That sent shivers down many spines. I believe we have resolved the issue of conflicting reports. It is clear Mitarashi-san was not in the wrong in this one. Is there any objection? The third announced and everyone around him shook their head. After what we heard tonight, I declare the 4 men be made missing Nin posthumously. As part of the reparations, I will add their standard bounties to Mitarashi-san's total bounties she earned from this mission. The assembled council all agreed that was reasonable considering the emotional trauma she was going through dealing with her sudden betrayal. To allow her to recover, I will give her a month off from any military activity except for training and allow her to do part-time work at the TNI for another month before she gets back to full-time status. Anything to add? I suggest seeing a counselor to help her mitigate the issues stemming from this betrayal. Inoichi added. The Hokage frowned. Mitigate? You don't mean resolve? He queried, and Inoichi sighed somberly. Ibiki scowled harshly as he knew what the blonde man meant. I'm afraid not. She was betrayed and abandoned to her fate without a second thought once again. I don't think that will ever be fully resolved, so the best thing we can do is help Mitarashi-san lessen her trauma enough to be a functioning member of the force. This may have a lesser impact compared to Orochimaru's betrayal, but this incident likely shattered her faith in the ability of most of our force to watch her back. She will most likely avoid squads from now on, and prefer to only take solo missions or with those she already trusts. She probably will act like she's past this in a short while, but I don't think she'll ever truly get over this. She would always watch her back even among comrades, and that's no way to work on squad missions. Inoichi solemnly explained to the grim-faced council. The third frowned sadly and asked again if there was anything else to add. No one said anything, so he brought the meeting to a close. A few minutes later, after the council has filed out of the room, he sank back into his chair with a weary sigh. Why must you continue to endure more painful betrayals, Anko-chan? He mumbled to himself. I think she'll recover sooner this time compared to before, sensei. Jiraiya's voice cut into his musing. He had almost forgotten his former student was still standing next to him. What makes you think that, Jiraiya-kun? Compared to after Orochimaru when she's had no one, she now has a couple people she can confide in and trust this time, including our favorite blonde. The Toad Sage replied with a knowing grin and Hiruzen nodded weakly with a smile. If someone could help Anko recover from this quickly, it would be Uzumaki Naruto and his ability to inspire and cheer up people around him. Naruto's apartment, the living room, was still in dead silence long after Anko has finished retelling what happened with her squad. She was now staring into her empty cup in her lap while Naruto was leaning forward in his chair, his elbows resting on his knees as he glared angrily at a spot on the wall directly in front of him. His cup was crackling under his grip. The silence was thick enough to cut with a knife that there was some barely perceptible relief from Anko when Naruto broke it. How could they? He asked half rhetorically, his tone hard. They tried to save their own asses, that's all. Anko's quiet reply was the answer. He shot up out of his chair, his teacup forgotten and shattered on the floor. She flinched visibly at her friend's anger. You want to justify their action? They just offered you up as a toy to be used to save their own asses. Naruto managed to keep his voice down, but his anger was obvious, and Anko shifted uncomfortably in her seat, looking very vulnerable at that moment. No, I don't. Just saying what they were thinking, she mumbled as her gaze shifted down to the floor. Naruto noticed her uncomfortable fidgeting and all the anger he was building up left him immediately. His eyes softened from the icy blue they were showing and he moved cautiously over to the couch next to his friend and sat down slowly. Anko seemed to relax the moment Naruto's anger left him, and he realized she didn't want him to get angry on her behalf, but wanted a comforting presence instead. As if to prove that, she leaned over and her arms slowly wrapped around Naruto's torso so she could pull herself in and snuggle against his left side. Naruto wasn't surprised by this as she occasionally did this in the past after bad days. Sorry, but I need this. I'm a psychotic bitch most of the time, but even on some days I just need to be held, she admitted softly into his chest. He smiled and began raking his left hand through her long hair, making her relax even more and about to purr. You may be a psychotic bloodsucker, but you've never been a bitch to me, he joked and was rewarded with a half-hearted swat on his stomach. Is that supposed to make me feel better, Gaki? Anko retorted into his chest, but he could hear the smile in her voice. They spent a few long minutes quietly enjoying the comfort before she finally spoke up. I don't think I'll be able to go on any more mission with teams again for a long time, at least not without driving myself insane with paranoia, she concluded sadly. Naruto took a deep breath, visibly lifting Anko's head up and down. So switch to working in TNI full-time. As you like to keep reminding me, the prisoners fear you so much they'd rather face the Kyuubi instead, he suggested. Anko shook a little as she chuckled. She then shifted her head to rest her chin on his chest and looked straight up into his face with a grin. That might be the case if I hadn't made myself way too good on the field, and my combat skills are top-notch, as I'm sure you remember experiencing firsthand. She teased and chuckled again at Naruto's grimace. He certainly remembered his very humbling losses at the hands of Anko in their matches. The old man can't afford to do without my skills, and I'm not going to ask him otherwise. I guess I'll have to only accept solo or large-scale missions, she concluded with a sad smile, and Naruto frowned. Large-scale missions wasn't much of an issue since that usually occurred in wars, but he didn't like the idea of her being alone out there on solo missions. That usually meant infiltrations and assassinations, and they were typically the most dangerous without help. Anko could do 100 of these missions flawlessly, and then on the next one, something could go wrong out of her control, and that'd be that. She would likely disappear without a trace, and there'd be nothing left of her except her name on the monument for those who died on the field. That thought terrified him more than anything else, and he possessively wanted to keep her here. Anko, sensing what was going through her blonde friend's mind, reached up with a hand and softly patted his cheek to knock him out of his thought process. Surprised blue eyes shifted downward onto focused light brown eyes. None of that depressing shit you were thinking, Gaki, she muttered sternly, much to the blonde's embarrassment, but she was a little glad on the inside that Naruto worried so much for her. She snuggled up even deeper while nuzzling her cheek against his chest, and just enjoyed listening to his steadily beating heart right next to her ear. She wished at that moment that he would be assigned with her on missions often when he graduated, because she knew she could trust him completely. If she didn't have to deal with two brats next to Naruto, she would have applied to be his Jounin sensei this coming graduation. What if I work with you? Naruto's voice snapped her out of her thoughts, and she smiled gratefully that he was thinking along the same line as her. Not as a jounin sensei and student. I know you're capable and can handle yourself, but I just don't have the patience to wipe the other two brats' asses for them if I took on both you and them. Enko replied a little dejectedly, making sure to verbally separate him from the others. He was clearly on a different level from them after all. Then I promise I'll make Chunin as quickly as I can and ask to work with you then. You won't have to wait too long before you'll have someone back you up again. Just please be careful until then. Naruto's worried but determined face made Enko feel warm inside as she continued to listen to his heartbeats. She blushed at his strong desire to make sure she was safe on missions and buried her face in his chest again. I'd like that very much. Naruto. She muttered into his chest, allowing her blush to intensify and her smile to get wider while her face was still hidden from him. Next morning Enko stretched and yawned as she woke up tangled up in the bed cover. She noticed the morning sun was beginning to come up and the darkness was lifting from the room. She frowned for an instant when she noticed she wasn't in her bedroom, but relaxed upon realizing it was Naruto's bedroom instead. She let out a happy sigh as she rolled her body onto her stomach and, with her face buried in the sheet, allowed herself to inhale some of Naruto's scent. It was a pleasant mixture of sandalwood and grass, with a small hint of musk. She breathed it in with a content smile for a minute, before she slowly sat up on the bed's edge. Naruto had given her his room for the night since she didn't feel like being alone in her apartment, and it was the best night of sleep she had since her nightmares caused by the curse mark stopped. It was odd since she should have been more affected by the recent betrayal, but Naruto apparently had more of a calming effect on her than she thought. She felt some warmth building in the pit of her abdomen as she remembered Naruto promising to find ways to back her up on their missions together. She smiled and stretched again, then hopped off to tug her discarded flannel pants back on since she slept through last night in just her t-shirt and panties. She then heard grunts of exertion coming from somewhere else in the apartment, and deduced it was Naruto doing some morning exercises in the living room. Enko silently opened the bedroom door and carefully glided down the hallway to peek into the living room. Naruto was facing away doing rapid push-ups in the middle of the living room, and a nice sheen of sweat was developing on his currently topless body. Enko grinned as she enjoyed watching the rippling of muscles on his arms and back as he continued to do his push-ups. Her grin turned mischievous as she silently tiptoed into the room behind the exercising man. She stood for a moment before silently hopping and landing gracefully on the blonde with her feet planted on his shoulders. She was hoping to surprise the boy and make him fall on his stomach. She was the one who was surprised when the boy barely flinched under her weight, but he stopped for a moment, his body fully extended into the air. Damn it, you crazy woman! You made me lose count and I have to start over from 400. Naruto muttered in annoyance from underneath her. Enko laughed and was nearly bucked off when he started doing his push-ups again. Deciding she liked her spot, she carefully turned around to face his rear end and sat down on his shoulder blades cross-legged. She rested an elbow on her knee and propped her head as if she was lazily thinking while the blonde continued to do his push-ups underneath her. You know, one would be polite enough to get off at this point. Naruto grumbled between counts. This one's not polite enough, I guess. I like this spot and you should be happy to feel my sexy ass on you. Enko retorted lazily to the blonde's further grumbling before he stopped cold upon feeling her wriggle her hips, digging more of her soft butt into his shoulders and the base of his neck. WW, what are you doing? He stuttered, trying to ignore the incredibly soft feeling as she continued to rub her derriere on him. He was just about to drop onto his stomach from the overwhelming sensations when she suddenly stopped. He was slightly disappointed about that for some reason. Just getting comfortable up here. Continue what you were doing. Enko's voice was dripping with satisfaction that she got a reaction out of him. What he didn't know was that she stopped because she suddenly felt a strong shock throughout her body from accidentally rubbing herself against some of his muscles. She was struggling to ignore the pleasant sensation just when Naruto muttered something about weird girls and resumed his push-ups. At that point, she strained to hold back a blissful yelp when some of his muscles shifted in just the right place and rubbed against her rapidly dampening lower lips through her pants. Her hips wanted to shift by itself downward to dig deeper into Naruto's back for more of that amazing feeling, but she managed to keep control and carefully shifted up a little instead to avoid any further accidental rubbing. She also thanked whoever gave Naruto those wisteria on the coffee table for covering up her sudden arousal around Naruto. Considering he was able to smell when she was having her periods, he certainly would smell a woman's arousal. She didn't want Naruto to think something was going on yet. Wait, yet? When did I decide that? Fighting down her hot flush and a desire to feel more of him rubbing against her, Anko sat in silence, bobbing up and down on his back as he continued to do his exercises for some time. She sighed when her stomach growled. "Oh, I'm feeling like breakfast at the dango shop. Want to come with me before your classes?" "Can't. Promised to have breakfast and dinner with Hinata-chan and her family for the week. They want to spend time with me before I leave for the summer," Naruto said shortly between breaths. Anko frowned at the reminder he was leaving sooner than she would have liked. "Maybe I can go with you again," she suggested in a hopeful tone. Naruto stopped while fully extended and let out an apologetic sigh. "Sorry. Ero-sennin told me it's just him and me this summer," he breathed out before resuming. Anko was disappointed and now became somewhat worried about what she was going to do without him as she dealt with the aftermath of her disastrous mission. "How's Hinata doing? It's been a while since I left Konoha after all," she asked, changing subjects to avoid getting depressed. "She's doing great. She was wondering about you too." Anko smiled a little at that. Despite their competition for Naruto's attention, she admired Hinata's kind yet strong nature. She was quiet, but she always knew exactly what she wanted, like how she was steadily going after Naruto for romance someday, and made sure nothing got in her way. Hinata also always gave everyone a fair shake, and only if they did something to deserve it would they earn her ire. She was also a calming influence on Naruto and was usually the one to make him think things through and ensure less problems that way. Anko, and from what she heard about the fox, the Kyuubi would have instantly told the blonde to jump into any situation with all of his jutsu blazing everywhere. She smiled at that imagery and considered her question for a moment. "Or what do you really think of Hinata?" Naruto stopped suddenly underneath her, and she was confused when she heard him mutter, "Why does this feel very familiar to me?" 3 days later in the Hokage Tower, Naruto stood and fidgeted nervously as he knocked on the door to the Hokage's office. He was a little worried about leaving Anko alone when he departed with Jiraiya in 2 days since Yugao hadn't returned from her mission yet. Anko was recovering well, but he felt it was because he was around to keep her distracted. The other night when he took his time returning to his apartment after dinner with the Hyuga family, he found Anko by his door, and she was a little short with him for a short while. It was clear she was anxiously awaiting him each night. "Come in." The Hokage's voice reached Naruto through the door, and he stepped into the office. Hiruzen was wondering what was bothering his surrogate grandson as he studied the young boy's serious face while stepping up to the desk. He assumed it had something to do with Anko, and he was proven right. "Sorry to bother you, Hokage Jiji. I just wanted to check with you on if Yugao-san will be returning from her mission soon?" Naruto nervously asked, and Hiruzen smiled sadly. "Considering it is a secret mission, I cannot tell you the exact date she returns for her safety. However, I will tell you it'll be soon," he replied gently. Naruto sighed in half dejection and half relief. "That's better than later." "Thank you. Is she doing okay?" "As good as someone who overheard her comrades plot to give her up to unsavory men can be, I suppose," Naruto replied with a scowl. He would have liked to find the traitor's cremated remains and piss on them. "That's all we can hope for. She'll have plenty of time to recover from this. I just don't like the idea of leaving her alone when I go with Ero-sennin. Any chance I could push back the date I leave a few days? I would have asked him, but I can't find him, even at the hot springs and the women's favorite swimming holes around the village." Naruto frowned at the old man's shake of his head. "Jiraiya-kun mentioned he has an appointment to keep and both of you will need to leave that day to make it. I am sure Anko-chan will be alright for a little while until her older sister returns. Doesn't sound like we're going to the usual training field this year?" Naruto queried with a curious frown. "Not this time, Naruto-kun. He's keeping it a surprise for you though, so just wait and see," Hiruzen replied with a smirk. The blonde just shrugged. "Alright, well, I tried my best. Thanks and see you around." He waved and turned to leave as the Hokage leaned back in his chair and smiled proudly at how caring the young man was about Anko. He was feeling better about his plan for Naruto each day graduation approached closer. A minute later, on the way out of the building, the same blonde nearly ran into someone and his eyes widened when he glanced up at the taller person's veiled face. "Kekkei Kazekage?" he blurted out as his eyes took in the man's robes that was similar to his surrogate grandfather's getup, but accented in blue instead of red with a kanji 4 wind on the pointed brim of the large conical hat. "Uzumaki-san?" The Kazekage's voice had a hint of surprise in it. Razo was then surprised further when he noted the blonde scowl for an instant before schooling his face into a neutral expression. He wondered if it was because the young man was in the presence of a powerful shinobi from another village, Or was it something his daughter told him during the last time she had been here? Please forgive me for not getting out of your way in time, Kazekage-sama. I hope you have a pleasant day. Naruto spoke neutrally as he was bowing, but inside he felt anger at the person in front of him for being the cause of Temari's problems. All his memories of the pretty blonde kunoichi came rushing back to him at that moment, and he still felt the sting of her rejecting him in terror. He wondered what she was doing at this present moment. He straightened his back without looking the Kazekage in the eyes and turned around to continue out of the building when he was stopped. Wait, Uzumaki-san. I wish to speak with you for a minute, but I have to go see Hokage Dano now. I would be very grateful if you agreed to wait for me to conclude my business, and we could talk afterward. It shall not be long. Raza called out after the young man. Naruto stood still with his back to the veiled man, and there was a long moment of tense silence between the two. It is about my daughter, the Kage added, hoping this would give the boy an incentive to remain. It worked. Okay. I would be honored to speak with you then. I'll be waiting just outside, Kazekage-sama. Naruto replied as he turned and bowed again. He was very curious about what this man had to say about Temari, and would gladly stick around for that. The Kazekage nodded sincerely, and resumed heading up the stairs to the Hokage's office. The blonde stepped outside and found a nice spot to rest against a nearby tree. Soon in Hokage's office, Raza sat silently in a chair opposite his counterpart with a small table in between, and he watched the older man study him with an intense scrutiny. He had just finished his usual business, and recently revealed his personal agenda. Sarutobi Hiruzen sighed wearily, and wondered just what a certain blonde did in a previous lifetime to earn this kind of possible complication. I have to admit that's a rather unusual proposal you're suggesting. You do not get any true advantage from this, and we have every right to turn it down at any point without repercussions to our alliance. You're putting yourself at every disadvantage to us. Why is that? What would Suna have to gain from this? He quizzed with suspicion clear in his voice. This plan was never for my village, but only for my daughter's happiness. She's not been able to find her place in my village, and she has no reason to remain with only her duty, as it's kunoichi tying her down. That might be good enough for most kages, but the fact is she's my daughter and I wish for more with her. You do not have to take the proposal now. Just take your time and decide, even if it's years into the future. If you do decide to take this and I am not in power for any reason, take this scroll to my council and they will have no choice but to comply. Raza replied, set in his decision as he set a scroll on the table between the two kages. However, you say we won't gain anything from this, but I wonder about the public goodwill for our village that might result from this, Hiruzen Dano. He added mysteriously as his gaze briefly shifted to a nearby photo of the fourth Hokage hanging above the large Hokage's desk at the back of the room. The third caught this gesture and widened his eyes, before smirking ruefully. He just blatantly told me his village's reputation would improve vastly if I accepted this, and it was known a foreign girl from his village achieved this with the son of the famous Yellow Flash. He has balls to just about outright say this, I'll admit that. I also have to question the intelligence level of my people if someone from another village figured out the connection already ahead of them. You surprise me, Razadano. Since this is a sensitive topic, I'm glad to know you probably do not intend to spread what we've discussed around in case this might make this proposal moot. He spoke easily, but his threat was very clear. Raza smirked behind his veil as he nodded his acceptance. After concluding the rest of their business, they exchanged their goodbyes, and in a minute the Kazekage stepped outside to find Naruto resting against a tree next to the entrance. He caught the young man's eyes and nodded his head. The blonde stood up quickly and joined the Kazekage in his walk around the village. Thank you again for waiting on me. The older man began to Naruto, who frowned. I'm afraid it wasn't for you, Kazekage-sama. I'm just curious about your daughter. I understand that, and I respect your honesty. Raza nodded his head in acceptance. How is she doing? She is currently a kunoichi, and a strong one too. I dare say she's already Chunin level, but I'm waiting on promoting her. Why the wait? Naruto glanced at the Kage with a frown. It is my wish to have her promoted together with my sons, the man admitted, and the blonde stopped in his track for a brief moment. You mean to tell me you're putting her with her psycho brother? The one that tried to kill her just a few days before the last time she visited here? He muttered incredulously as he resumed his walk next to the robed man. Raza winced behind his veil. She told him that much apparently. Somehow he easily got her out of her shell if she was willing to talk about her brother like that. Yes, and I know this sounds bad. However, I have personally trained Gaara since that incident, and he's more in control of himself now. Just as long as people made sure to not get in his way, they would be alright. He thanked his veil for hiding his wince again when the blonde shot him a venomous look. So he just changed from an unstable psycho to a homicidal sociopath. Naruto concluded in deadpan. The Kazekage couldn't say anything in defense to that one. They walked in uncomfortable silence for a few long minutes as they seemed to make their way to a hotel, and Naruto let out a deep sigh. Look, Kazekage-sama, I can't tell you what to do with your family, but please at least just make sure Temari-san is going to be okay. From what she told me, she's had it rough dealing with her brother, and her life in Suna wasn't the greatest. I just think she at least deserves a chance to find her own happiness, and she'll get that if she lives long enough. That's all I want for her. Naruto requested of the wide-eyed man. Why would you go this far for a foreign girl you only met for a few hours? She also was terrified of your secret that day and yelled some hurtful statements to you. I don't care about what happened that day. Sure, it hurt a little even now when I remember it, but I understood why she was scared. I'm asking this because if someone like me can actually find happiness, then she at least deserves her shot. Since the day I was born, I've only known despair and emptiness for 5 years. Happiness was a foreign concept to me. I pretended to smile if someone else actually smiled at me because I was just imitating what other people did. I spent nights staring at myself in mirror, seeing only either pure despair or absolute rage on my face. That was the only thing I knew back then. Naruto spoke in a dull tone as his beautiful blue eyes deadened to such dullness that the shocked Kazekage wondered if the boy was a zombie for a moment. He never saw his son display this kind of expression. The blonde's dull eyes then sprang back to full life, as if what Raza just saw was an illusion. I managed to make friends when I was about to turn 6. I still pretended though. I copied their behaviors and words to pass myself off as normal. However, it wasn't long till I began feeling actual happiness. It was gradual at first, but eventually one day I realized I didn't need to pretend anymore. That was the greatest day ever for me, I think. So if someone as undeserving as me could be happy, then Temari-san deserves her shot to go for it too. Even her brother can change too. Naruto finished, then struck an assertive pose and pointed at the bemused Kazekage. That's why if I ever meet him and he's still being a huge asshole about just killing people left and right, then I'm going to beat all of that asshole out of him, and tell him there's more to life than ripping people apart. He declared with such determination in his voice that the Kage was already inclined to believe him. After staring at the still pointing boy for a moment, he let out a sincere chuckle from behind his veil. I may have to put my faith in you then if I fail in the future, was all he admitted as they reached the hotel Raza was staying at. I have to prepare for departure. Before I leave, I need to be honest with you here. I don't normally meddle in my children's lives, but in this case I feel I need to. Temari has regretted what she said to you that day, and I see it in her eyes every day since then. I actually invited her to come with me on this trip, but she declined. She apparently was afraid of what she would hear from you. The Kazekage decided to put it out there now. Naruto glanced up at him with wide eyes. She was? I would have said everything was fine, and that'll be that. I think that's all she needs to hear, and I believe she would feel better afterward, Raza admitted. He was then curious when he watched the blonde dig a blank scroll out of one of his jacket's many pockets along with a bottle of ink and brush. The boy searched for a flat surface and found it on a nearby bench. He then moved to lay the scroll out on it, and immediately began writing. The Kazekage, watching from behind the boy, was surprised to find the handwriting to be beautiful and precise. Despite such amazing beauty, he wrote blazingly fast with no mistakes or misplaced blots of ink. Raza concluded the blonde in front of him was practicing Fuinjutsu in addition to his other skills, and he had to wonder just how far this offspring of that man would get with his talents. The scroll snapping closed broke the man out of his thoughts, and he saw Naruto holding a closed scroll up in front of him. If it's not too much trouble, Kazekage-sama, please pass this on to Temari-san. I think she'll feel better reading that. He spoke with a genuine smile. Raza studied the young man as he took the scroll into his hands, and felt completely assured at that moment he made the correct choice with his plan for Temari. Thank you, Uzumaki-san. My daughter will be relieved to hear from you, and I wish you good luck with your future endeavors. This is the last thing I have to say, this time as her father. I expect you to make the right choice with your heart in the future. You will see what I mean should that day come to pass, he said sincerely and bowed his head. A confused Naruto bowed back and watched the Kazekage disappear up into the hotel. Wonder what he meant by that, he muttered to himself as he walked off down a street. The night before departure, Naruto yawned as he opened the door to his apartment. He had just left Anko at her apartment, and was just about ready to fall over asleep. He was already packed for the trip and would just have to get up tomorrow morning and walk straight out the main gate with Jiraiya. As he thought over his departure, he felt something was off in his unlit apartment. He didn't take the time to think this over and immediately went into action. He instantly rolled forward on the floor and sprang out of it into a jump toward the far wall of the living room, and as soon as his feet and hands touched on it, he sprang off toward one of his chairs that was hiding in a pitch-black corner. As he sharpened his fingernails into claws with a snarl, a large hand shot out of the dark corner and grabbed him by his neck to stop the boy completely in his flight with a loud choking sound. Good try, Gaki. You almost got my timing off with that jump to the wall there, but too bad. A man's voice rumbled out as the hand continued to hoist the coughing boy in the air by his neck. A grinning Jiraiya faded into existence from the shadows. Oh, mind putting me down, Erosenin? Naruto managed to cough out. Why would I do that when you're just a clone? Jiraiya shot back with an evil grin as he squeezed his hand on the now surprised clone's neck hard enough to pop it. His other hand shot out and slammed onto a nearby wall. He was rewarded with a yelp of surprise and the same blonde shimmering into existence on the wall, his neck trapped by the hand. It was apparent Naruto managed to hide there with the invisibility cloak jutsu earlier when he rolled into the living room. Nice little trick with the clone and a jutsu I taught you, Gaki. That would fool everyone but me. Jiraiya spoke with a proud grin. The problem is the one I wanted to fool was you. Naruto grumbled with a half grin even as he was still pinned against the wall. Well, that's why you're my student, Gaki. It's so you would surpass me someday. Jiraiya retorted as he let go of his godson, and Naruto landed on the floor not so gracefully. Anyway, any reason you decided to let yourself into my apartment? He asked wearily, his desire to go to bed obvious. Just wanted to see the new apartment my cute little godson got, and I thought I'd tell you where we're going, since I think you might need to pack a few extra things. Really? Where? Naruto's exhaustion was momentarily blown away by his excitement. We're going up north to the land of iron. So pack warm. In fact, very warm. So we're going there to get the rest of the fox's chakra then. I shouldn't be surprised by that. Naruto assumed, but Jiraiya shook his head. That was an added bonus. I planned this for a little bit longer than you think. That's why I thought it was a nice coincidence when the fox told you that was where her den is. He reminded, and Naruto remembered how his godfather reacted to that revelation with surprise last year. So what's there? In my travels, I came across a great weapon maker, and I felt he was very capable of making you the best weapons you need. I commissioned him about 1.5 years ago for this job. Iron is where he lives, and we're going there to pick up your shiny new sabers. Jiraiya announced with a smirk at his godson's gobsmacked expression. What? I think I only saved up enough for a barely decent pair. How will I be able to afford custom orders? Naruto managed to stutter out. No worries, Gaki. It's my treat, so think of this as your early graduation present. Considering I know a saber's main weakness to be its low durability, I ordered 6 sabers to be made so you'd have some backups at least just in case. In addition, the weapon maker will be prepared to make more in the future if you need more, but that'll have to be on your own expense from now on. Not that you should worry about the durability, since I was promised the sabers would be better made than most blades out there, and it'll be a long time before you'll have to worry about their condition. Jiraiya explained, amused to see the growing excitement on Naruto's face. The ecstatic blonde immediately rocketed into Jiraiya's chest with rapid-fire thank yous mixed with the older man's laughter that went on for a while. Early next morning, a young woman with long and beautiful platinum blonde hair was waiting outside a certain apartment building's entrance. Yamanaka Ino let out a small sigh with a sad smile as she once again was reminded of the fact her longtime friend and fellow blonde was leaving for several months today. She crossed her arms under her still-growing bust to guard against the slightly chilly and foggy morning air, and leaned against the wall next to the front door, still deep in thoughts about one Uzumaki Naruto. She couldn't help but feel that she was going to really miss him this summer for some reason. She was brought out of her thoughts when she heard the sound of heavy wooden geta clacking across a street's cobbled surface, and it was steadily growing closer. She glanced around, not finding anyone at first. After a moment, she thought for a brief instant that she could feel a presence coming from her left down the street in front of the apartment building. Wondering what that feeling was as she glanced in that direction, she finally made out the large silhouette of the legendary Sanin's Jiraiya appearing through the morning fog. Oh ho? A cute girl waiting on a certain someone at this time of the morning? Do I sense something between you two? The tall man spoke up with a knowing grin as he watched the young blonde's face begin to turn startlingly red at such a straightforward question. I dash. Ino tried to speak, but she couldn't stop stuttering. This was made worse by the older man's amused chuckling. This also served to make her forget about that odd sensation she felt for a brief moment earlier. You'd better not be sexually harassing Ino-chan, you old pervert! A young man's voice called out from the apartment building's door, making Ino jump and changing Jiraiya's amusement to deadpan. They snapped their attention around to find Naruto watching them both with a raised eyebrow and an amused grin. She's way too young for me, Gaki. Even I have standards. Jiraiya grumbled even as Ino moved behind Naruto for protection, though it was more to hide her growing embarrassment than anything else. I'm shocked you actually had some standards to begin with. Naruto shot back with that amused grin still in place, before turning around to face Ino while pointedly ignoring Jiraiya's indignant. I'm happy you're here to see me off. It can't be easy to get up this early. He began with a warm smile that served to make the young woman blush. Damn, why was she feeling so nervous in front of him now? It's no big deal, Naruto. I usually get up this early for work at the shop. I just wanted to see you off before I get started for the day. Ino replied as she fidgeted slightly while twirling a strand of hair from her long bang with a finger. Even so, thank you. You have no idea how happy this makes me. I'll miss you, Ino-chan. Naruto said softly with that smile still in place. Ino gulped and nodded, feeling warm inside all the way from the top of her head to her feet. All of a sudden, she didn't want him to go at all, but she knew he had to do this. Unable to say anything more without risking embarrassing herself further, she moved forward to wrap him up in a tight and somewhat intimate hug. Naruto returned it readily, and it was at this time that she realized just how much her friend had grown up since they met in that playground all those years ago. She couldn't help but think it was a very good thing. I'll miss you too, Naruto. She finally managed to say without her voice breaking as they released and stared at each other for a moment. It was when Jiraiya cleared his throat. Much as I hate to do this, but we need to go, Gaki, he said gently, knowing this wasn't the time for teasing the too young couple. Naruto nodded and let out a sigh, while Ino bit her lips as her breath hitched slightly. I'll be back before you know it. Tell your parents I said hey, and that I'll miss them too. Take care, Ino-chan, he said and turned toward Jiraiya with a wave over his shoulder, and they then began walking down the street toward the main gate. It didn't take Ino long to lose the two in the fog, and she needed to go back to the shop. As she began to walk away, she kept wondering why she was feeling the need to cry as tears threatened to blur her vision. Meanwhile, at the main gate, Hyuga Hinata turned the corner on the mostly empty main street to find the gate to outside the village looming large in her view. She let out a dejected sigh at the sight. She really didn't want Naruto to leave, and it felt like it got harder and more painful for her each summer. Last year, it felt like her chest was constantly clenching painfully any time she was reminded of Naruto's absence until he finally came back. She wondered how she was going to deal with it this year if it was worse than that. As she walked up to the gate, a person came into view at its base, and she recognized the shape immediately. Hinata smiled gently as she found her answer and hoped this person would agree with the idea. Midarashi Anko was squatting down against the side of the large wooden gate with her arms wrapped around her knees to ward off the morning chill. She was dreading the moment Naruto stepped outside the gate, and she won't see him for 3 months. She knew she shouldn't have been so dependent on the younger man over the past week, but she couldn't help it when his presence did nothing but calm and comfort her in the middle of this crazy world. Hell, she had to wonder if he was just an older midget because no normal 13-year-old should have been so mature and able to easily put up with an unstable woman like her. At this point, someone stepped close enough to catch her attention, jolting her out of her thoughts. She glanced up to see Hinata. Thinking about him, Anko-san? The indigo-haired girl asked with a soft smile, as if she was happy that someone else was thinking about the same person that she was. There was no teasing or jealousy. Anko blushed at being read so easily. Why else would I be up at this godforsaken hour for? She mumbled as she shifted her gaze away from the younger girl's pale eyes. It felt like she was being read through the longer she kept staring into them. You might have been just taking a walk, Hinata teased lightly as she moved over next to Anko's squatted form and leaned against the frame of the gate as well. Anko smiled a little as she stared down the main street at a side street she knew Naruto would emerge from to take the path here. Yeah, I'm just taking a walk. As they waited silently for their favorite blonde, Hinata glanced down at Anko as she remembered back to what Naruto said about this purple-haired woman. Flashback to that night outside the compound. I think she's the strongest person I know. Not just physically but on the inside too. She's dealt with so much pain and hatred that she has had it worse than I did, and that's pretty bad. Yet, she managed to stick it out and never gave up. Even when things got better for her recently, she still never took anything for granted and still strives to be as strong as she can get. She just refuses to let anyone tell her otherwise. Naruto said fondly as he glanced up at the waning moon. She sounds like you, Naruto-kun. Hinata remarked, but she was surprised by a momentarily dulling of his eyes and his smile shifted down a notch. No, I wasn't strong enough once. And because of that, she'll always be a better person than me for that. But I've never seen you as anything other than strong. At this point, Naruto shifted his gaze toward her with an odd smile. This was before I met any of you, so don't worry. He clarified. Hinata wanted to know what happened, but she knew he wasn't going to say anything more about it. It feels like, with her unwillingness to give up and fight it out, Anko-chan always showed me how much better a person I could become. I think as long as I have her around so I can remind myself, I'll eventually become that person, and I guess that's why I trust her to keep me going straight in that direction. The fact she's fun to be around in the meantime probably didn't hurt. Naruto added with a chuckle. Hinata smiled and nodded. I understand, Naruto-kun. Thank you for being honest with me. Present Hinata knew the reason for Naruto suddenly striving to improve himself even more over the past year was next to her, and she was thankful for that. He would become an even more amazing man in the future, and she was very much looking forward to that. Anko-san, how would you like it if we spent some time together? Just the two of us. It may help pass time quickly over the summer. She suddenly offered. Anko was surprised at the offer out of the blue, but had to admit she found it very appealing. She knew how bad Hinata had it for Naruto, and she was starting to wonder about herself now after the past week of being addicted to finding comfort in his presence. Having Hinata around to chat with, sometimes about Naruto, would help with the loneliness that would certainly result from him leaving. She glanced up at an anxious-looking Hinata and considered what Naruto told her about this girl. Flashback to that morning in Naruto's apartment. Oi, get off. Naruto said gruffly, and Anko quickly complied. As he stood up and grabbed a nearby gym towel to wipe off the sweat, she was gleefully enjoying checking his muscular torso out. She felt the lingering sensation from accidentally rubbing against him return in full force upon imagining a few more years added to the age of the blonde in front of her. She liked the image very much, to say the least. Hinata-chan asked me the same thing about you a while ago, so that's why what you asked threw me off. Naruto explained as he continued rubbing the towel on his torso. It was nearly enough to distract Anko, but she persevered. She did? Yup. Told her what I thought, and she seemed happy with what she heard. So you had to make up some good things about me? Anko teased, but Naruto frowned. I would never lie about you because you're a good person. You make me want to improve myself all the time and be a better person, and that's what I told Hinata-chan. He said it so sincerely that Anko blushed bright red before she realized it. What are you saying, Gaki? She stuttered, and Naruto chuckled at her expression. He continued before she could get annoyed. To answer your question, I guess, just like how you make me try my best to be strong, Hinata-chan keeps me grounded. She keeps me thinking of 100 different ways to look at a situation before I act. I know how much she cares about me and how much she respects me, for whatever reason I probably won't understand, and she's the type that would gladly take whatever happens to her in stride as long as it has something to do with me. Because of that, I'm terrified that I'd take that for granted one day and hurt her badly if my rashness drew her in. So what I do is I watch where I go before I take a step and make sure it causes the least amount of trouble for anyone if something blows up. So I guess you and Hinata-chan both keep me in the middle. I don't want to be complacent, but I'm also making sure I don't fly too close to the sun with wings made of wax, to quote a tale the fox told me. Naruto explained nervously as he finished toweling off. There was silence for a moment as Anko considered what he said before she nodded. I think I understand what you mean. Though, who would fly close to the sun with wax wings? It's obvious they would melt. She pointed out with a confused frown. Naruto laughed suddenly. The fox said this Icarus person could learn a thing or two from you. Back to present, Anko smiled at the memory before looking back at Hinata, who was anxiously awaiting her answer. Sure. Figured it's time we buried the hatchet between us. How about when the Gaki leaves, we go to the dango shop? I know they sell those cinnamon rolls Gaki said you like a lot. She replied with a grin, and Hinata blushed at the mention of her addiction. We'll at least give in to our addictions together, the young jounin added with a chuckle, and the other woman smiled brightly. I'd like that, Anko-san. I don't like the sound. Just call me Chan like Gaki does. In return, I'll call you the same way. Thank you, Anko-chan. At this point, Anko got tired of squatting and stood up fully to stretch with a yawn, and Hinata was wondering about something. Ah no. Anko-chan, why do you often call Naruto-kun Gaki? It annoys the hell out of him. In returns he calls me bloodsucker once in a while. Anko replied with a laugh as she remembered the various annoyed expressions Naruto displayed. Ano, why would he call you that? The younger girl asked nervously, and shifted a little uncomfortably under Anko's mischievous expression. Want me to show you, Hinata-chan? She offered with a grin. As if to save Hinata from an uncomfortably close shave with a kunai, Naruto appeared on the main street with Jiraiya at that moment. Wasn't expecting you here, the blonde called out as he and the Toad Sage approached. We came here to see you off, Hinata clarified as she bowed deeply to a suddenly sheepish Jiraiya. Please take care of him, Jiraiya-sama. At this, Naruto frowned. No, I'm the one who's going to take care of him. I bet in the next town we stop in, he'll be stomped to death by angry women and I'll have to bury him. He grumbled before being conked on his head by an irritated Jiraiya. Don't make bets like that lightly. Your luck's so terrifyingly good it's liable to come true, he muttered grouchily. Anko and Hinata chuckled at the banter, and they all sighed when silence fell on them. It was time. Hinata stepped up to hug Naruto first. I'm going to miss you, was all she was able to say into his ear without her voice breaking. Anko followed suit after Hinata released. Be safe, and I expect you to stop by my apartment first thing when you get back, she whispered. Naruto accepted their hugs with an assuring smile. I'll be back before you know it. Try to keep this town in one piece till then, he joked before he and Jiraiya signed out at the gatehouse and stepped out. Before long, the girls finally lost sight of the small blonde and white specks in the distance and Anko sighed. Back before we know it? Kinda hard to believe that when we're going to be looking out here a lot over the summer, she mumbled, and Hinata nodded glumly. Finally, they turned and walked into the village toward the dango shop to drown in their addictions. Tomorrow in Sunakagure. Temari. Raza's voice called out from behind Temari in the living room of the family estate. She was sitting on the sofa reading a book, relaxing in a comfortable outfit with her hair down. It was one of her rare off days. Yes, Kazakage-sama? She muttered with some slight annoyance in her voice, and the man winced a little. I have just returned from Kanahagakure. I thought you would like to know I ran into the Uzumaki boy. He smirked a little when he watched his daughter's head perk up slightly from her book. Is that so, Kazakage-sama? She struggled to keep her voice neutral, but there was obviously an undertone of anxiety. He said he hopes you were doing well. I see. Her shoulders slumped slightly, a little disappointed there wasn't more. She was so easy to read. He also gave me this scroll to give to you. Mirth laced Raza's voice as he held a scroll up in his hand. Whoosh! He blinked in surprise to see his hand empty. He turned his head to the side to see Temari already standing at the living room's doorway, with the scroll clutched tightly in both hands. That was faster than Jounin's speed. Thank you for taking the time to deliver his message, father. Temari bowed formally, but she couldn't keep her smile off her face as she stepped out, obviously headed for the privacy of her bedroom. Raza watched her go with a slight smile on his face. She called me father just now. Just this once was more than I expected. Temari closed her bedroom's door and briskly walked over to her desk. She sat and set the scroll down. As she reached up to pull it open, she paused. What if it's something bad? Will he say he hates me or something similar? I don't think I can take that. Doubt crept into her mind for a moment, but she shook it off and, with a determined expression, pulled the scroll open. The first thing she noticed was the beautiful and precise handwriting, and had to gasp audibly. She took up calligraphy and considered her handwriting to be top-notch, but this was 100 times better. Before she could get lost in the art that was Naruto's handwriting, she shook it off and began to read. Dear Temari-san, if you're wondering about the handwriting, it's a side effect of my Fuinjutsu training. Everyone keeps asking about that, so I figured that'd be the first thing you'd notice too. Temari blushed at being read so easily. 3 days in advance too if she included the travel time for her father to get back here from Konoha. I'm sorry, but I should keep this short since your father needed to leave soon. However, he was telling me you're now a strong kunoichi. I'm happy to hear you're doing great so far in Suna, despite dealing with what you've told me about last time we saw each other. Unfortunately, your father also told me your brother is now a homicidal maniac instead of an unstable psycho, so I hope you're hanging on. At least just long enough until I meet you again and kick your brother's killing tendencies out of him for you. Temari laughed slightly and her eyes watered a little at how much Naruto still cared about her welfare. In fact, I'm about to leave the village for a few months to train. I'll definitely be even more stronger when I come back. She smiled and whispered a brief prayer for Naruto's safe journey. One last thing before I go. Temari-san, remember this. I do not hate you at all. I do not want to have nothing to do with you. I'd like to be friends with you someday if you're willing to look past my uniqueness. There's nothing to forgive here because I have never once held anything against you for that day, and I hope you won't hold anything against neither. I hope we'll see each other again soon and that everything will be okay between us this time. Sincerely, Uzumaki Naruto. A drop of water splashed onto the scroll next to Naruto's signature, as Temari rose a hand to wipe away tears from her cheeks. She sniffled and sighed shakily. Everything's already okay now, Naruto. Thank you so much for writing this to me. You have no idea how much better I'm feeling right now, she whispered to the scroll in a broken voice. She slowly closed it after rereading the letter several times. Standing up from the desk with shaky legs, she stopped at her dresser that was topped with her collection of knitted dolls. It grew in the years since, but the centerpiece had always been a blonde orange-clad human doll that she knitted herself. It had a simple expression with 2 small knots of dark blue yarn for eyes and a short black string that formed a smile. She smiled affectionately as she reached out for the doll and gingerly took it into her hands. She then slowly climbed onto her bed and drew herself into a tight ball with a moan as she clutched the doll to her chest. Thank you, and please be okay wherever you are, Naruto, was all she mumbled out before some quiet sniffling filled the room at the same time in a small village on the way to Land of Iron. I knew it, you little bastard! Jiraiya growled as he ran at full speed down a street. Naruto was being carried under his arm facing backward. He stared with a deadpan expression at a roaring crowd of angry towel-clad women chasing after them. What did I do? I was just minding my own damn business when you suddenly grabbed me as you ran by, he said dully as he casually dodged a thrown butcher knife that almost stuck Jiraiya in the back instead. It was that bet you made about me being stomped to death. You just had to make it come true, the Toad Sage shouted as he ran faster. You were the one that said we had to leave on time for an appointment. At first I thought you meant we had to see the weapon maker at a certain time. But you're a despicable bastard, and I'm ashamed you're my godfather. Naruto spat out venomously as he continued to be carried by the despicable bastard. Don't say that, Gaki. If you're a real man, you just absolutely can't miss this all-female onsen convention going on in this town. The prime beauties usually only bath at certain times and I just had to be here to get more inspiration. And now you're running for your life from them. I have no idea where they got those knives from when all they're wearing are towels. Naruto calmly observed of the frothing women screaming obscenities at the 2 males as Jiraiya continued to deftly slip through obstacles. Who said it's just me running? You're in danger with me too, the Toad Sage retorted as he hopped over a high fence which the women smashed through with brute force. He felt absolute dread overwhelm him when Naruto glanced up at him with a bloodthirsty grin. I said so, since you've been talking to a clone this whole time. This is for making boss leave Anko-chan alone when he didn't have to. Have fun being stomped to death, Unko Senin. The clone growled as it popped, leaving Jiraiya empty-handed and horror-struck. That was just before he tripped over a wire left behind by the original Naruto now perched above on a nearby rooftop, who had prime view of his godfather finally being caught by the angry women. He had to wince once in a while as he watched unspeakable horrors being visited on Jiraiya, and cackled evilly at the shrill screams he was hearing. After a while, the women finally left behind a broken and battered man in a desolate alley. I hate you, the squashed Toad Sage croaked out. I love you too, Naruto retorted in deadpan from his rooftop perch. He felt a breeze caress his face and blinked at this sudden odd sensation. He rotated his head around while taking in the view of the large and flat landscape surrounding the small town they were in. He found what he was looking for as he began locking onto a certain direction and narrowed his eyes into the distance for a moment. He nearly jumped when a fully healed and unblemished Jiraiya hopped onto the roof next to him after being a pile of broken bones and bruised flesh just 30 seconds ago. Something catch your attention, Gaki? He spoke as if his declaration of hatred never happened. Just an odd feeling, that's all. Someone could be thinking about you. What's in that direction? I know it's not Konoha. Naruto pointed where he felt this odd sensation. Suna. You got a girl there? The older man joked, not really meaning it. Naruto turned to his godfather with a half-smile. I got a friend there, was all he mysteriously said as he hopped off the roof.